Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1187 of the War News stream. And it is the Sunday night fundraiser stream, the big night of the week to raise more funds to help Ukraine. And we also have big news to cover tonight as well. Ukraine's launched its fifth day of massive drone attacks on Moscow and several other regions of Russia. Also, a Russian train exploded today in a sabotage attack in Belgorod. And also, the Russian forces fired on a civilian airliner, luckily not hitting the passengers, but very, very close to it. And we have massive news today, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to hear of significant developments throughout the entirety of the Ukraine-Russian war over the course of the day. We've been able to hear that Ukraine and Russia have conducted significant drone attacks on each other over the course of 24 hours, with Ukrainian drones landing hits throughout the entirety of the western region of the Russian Federation, even as far east as the area of Naberezhny Chelny, around 850 miles inside of the Russian Federation. Not only that, we have also been able to see that in the panic, the Russian Federation's ground air defense forces actually targeted and fired at a Russian commercial airliner within the area of the Russian airspace over the course of the past 24 hours. Not only that, we have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is now escorting their Shadow Fleet tankers with the Russian Navy, making it much more difficult for NATO or European-aligned or Western-aligned allies to be able to attempt to seize or divert these Shadow tankers and stop them from completing their illegal tasks of circumventing sanctions and continuing to fund the Russian Federation's war effort inside of Ukraine. On the flip side, inside the state of Ukraine, we have also been able to hear that Ukrainian drone attacks have been causing significant damage to the Russian Federation, but Russian drone attacks have also been causing an equal amount of damage inside the state of Ukraine, as hundreds of drones have been fired by the Russian Federation over just the past few hours alone, striking throughout the entirety of Ukraine, but most specifically, once again, at the city of Kyiv. striking multiple buildings, apartment blocks, and residential zones, and also, once again, most likely causing casualties. However, Ukrainian armed forces along most of the front lines have been able to hold their ground today and have been able to inflict significant losses on the Russian Federation armed forces. And not only that, we have also been able to hear that the first grain shipment from Ukraine has arrived in the port of Tartus in Syria, an interesting development, while the North Koreans are now attempting to use balloons to try and right the vessel, the Hocheon-class destroyer, which capsized after a failed slipway launch attempt several days ago. We have a very interesting amount of news here tonight. Quite a significant amount of it, mind you. But most of it tonight is focused entirely on the war in Ukraine, which is something that we really don't get to see a lot these days, and something that I'm sure many people who are old guards or legends of the channel remember was the old staple and bread and butter of the news reporting on this channel, was reporting on the war in Ukraine each and every day as the primary story of each news cycle. And today, it's like it was back in the old times. Moving on into the area of the Russian Federation, we have been able to see that Ukraine has launched more significant drone attacks into the Russian Federation, with the number of drones involved ranging in the hundreds from what we've been able to hear. This time we were able to confirm that a wide number of Ukrainian drones was used, and there was such a large number of them, such a volume of them, that they actually ended up running into each other, at least in this area of the Russian Federation, and causing themselves to crash. We can actually see the two Liutis flying fairly close to each other, and here in a second, unfortunately, they'll get tangled into each other and end up crashing, which happens right there. And you can see them lock into each other and then take each other down.
And that was the Ukrainian drones that did that?
Yes, that's how many drones were in the airspace of Russia at any given time, is that they actually were starting to run into each other, at least in this clip, and actually have mid-air collisions.
That's insane. Oh.
Oh, yeah.
They were so thankful it crashed on its own, because the air defense surely wasn't going to get it.
Oh, hell no. The air defense was too busy doing something else. In the meantime, while Ukrainian drones were, in some rare instances, taking each other out due to the density of the attack, we were also able to see that the Russians were busy with the air defense doing something else, firing at commercial airliners. I'm not even kidding. They actually were taking shots at commercial airliners. Here's the clip. And that right there is tracer fire from a ground-based machine gun that was firing at what appears to be an Ilyushin 62. Maybe not the best thing for the ground air defense to be that trigger-happy that they're firing at what is clearly a commercial airliner, and it is showing us that Russian air defense may be poorly trained. Maybe poorly trained. We can't really tell that for certain, because many people know that even the best trained air defense gunners can sometimes get it confused. What's the difference between a drone and a commercial airliner? Of course, there's only a several hundred-foot length and wingspan difference between a small Ukrainian drone and that of a Russian airliner, and the fact that most Ukrainian drones are propeller-driven, while most commercial airliners use some form of a jet turbofan or turbojet like the IL-62. These are small things that a very well-trained air defense gunner could easily overlook and begin to fire at the wrong target. We cannot judge the Russians' level of training or their competency in the air defense role due to this incident, but we sure as hell are going to, because this is the fumble of a century right here. They actually almost took down a legitimate civilian airliner because of their own incompetence.
Yikes. That is bad.
My God.
It's amazing they didn't hit it. That just is a testament to how bad their aim is. Thankfully, it actually worked out for the better this time.
Thankfully, it did. It looks like they finally stopped firing, but we can see here in another clip an explosion in the distance. I don't think this was at all connected to the civilian airliner. This actually appears to be the air defense near to Tver during the attack that occurred last night, but it is quite clear at this point Russian air defense is not well trained at all, and that may be the reason why Ukrainian drones were able to make it so deep into Russia and also able to make it to their targets, is because one, they can't aim because they weren't able to hit that civilian airliner, which is quite a large target, and two, they also can't identify a drone or a civilian airliner apart from each other. So moving on from that and on down into the area of the Oryol Oblast, we also got to see something else that was a little bit interesting in the advent of the air attack last night. The Russians attempted to fire off a surface-to-air missile within the area of the city of Oryol, but it appears that there was a small issue. It appears that that there was some sort of missile dysfunction, or something along those lines. Take a look. There's the surface-to-air missile, and there it went. Now, let's go to the instant replay here, and let's look at this one more time. So the missile went up into the air, and then it did a loop-de-loop and sink, and went right down into the ground and exploded. Now, folks, deep question here. Are they supposed to do that?
No.
That was a rhetorical question. I'm just kidding, by the way.
I gave you a very straightforward answer to that question.
But beyond that, the surface-to-air missiles are not supposed to be doing that. I think all of you all know that. And we believe that the Russian Federation is actually fielding a brand new kind of missile, which is called the surface-to-air-to-surface missile. It gets launched from the surface into the air to try and hit an air target, but once it decides that it's tired and it's not getting paid enough, it then goes straight back to being a surface-to-surface missile. So technically, it's a surface-to-air-to-surface missile. These are brand new by the Russians, and we believe that they're going to be posing a lot of danger to the Russians on the ground, because who knows where they could land and what kind of damage they could cause. Moving even further on, while the air attack was going on, for some reason near to Ingalls, they showed off the new defenses that they have for the jet fuel storage tanks, which appears to be a large amount of nets. There are fishermen in Russia who are currently undergoing a net shortage from the amount of nets that are covering this facility right now.
That's a surprising amount of infrastructure they're able to set up. I'm kind of shocked they pulled that off, actually.
You know, I'm kind of shocked as well. It's an insanely large amount of nets. But will it work? Probably not. Because once the net is punctured in one area, it mostly will start to lose its rigidity around there, and will probably start to peel open to provide an even larger opening for another drone to come on through. And considering that the Ukrainians do attack with their drones in at least a minimum of double taps, this means that once the net is punctured by the first drone, the second drone will most likely be able to make it through. Moving on out of that, however, and on further on towards Naberezhny Chelny, and specifically the small town outside of it of Yela Buga, and you know that's what cavemen did back in the day, folks. When they would get angry, instead of just saying Uga Buga, they would Yela Buga. But moving on over there to Naberezhny Chelny and into the town of Yela Buga, where some cavemen may continue to live, we were able to see that there was an ongoing attack in the area. Oh.
По заводу, блядь. Блядь, как на работу идти завтра, блядь.
Relax, jeez, this is happening in Ukraine like every night. Come on, this is ridiculous. This girl's acting like she's never heard of this. It's like your country is at war. It's like, and also that's like 5 miles away from you. Anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip, we did get to see the failed air defense launch, but we also got to see another angle of it. And we also got to see in this clip a frame of the video where the explosion occurred. Nevertheless, it does appear that this town deep inside the Russian Federation did come under attack. We're not exactly sure if the drones were attempting to hit Yela Buga or the area of Naberezhny Chelny. It's a little bit unsure at the moment, considering that Yela Buga is more of a suburb to the city of Naberezhny Chelny. We have a feeling that the drones were probably pressing forward to Naberezhny Chelny itself and attempting to hit one of the larger industrial concerns that can be found inside of the city, which would be quite concerning to the Russians, much like the industrial concerns themselves. But beyond that, however, I do understand that there has been a great myriad of questions and thoughts that have been put out by many people here, a lot of interesting ones, about the Russian forces that opened fire on an airliner in Russian airspace today near to the area of Moscow, which we just showed a little while ago. And a lot of people are kind of starting to get a little bit of an idea that there might be some danger inherent in the Russian air defense systems and the fact that civilian airliners are now being targeted and attacked as well. And it appears that most people are saying it's an accident waiting to happen, and a commercial airliner at some point is probably going to end up shooting down a civilian airliner, or air defense is going to shoot down a civilian airliner. I think I said that the wrong way around right there. Beyond that, some other people are saying it's just a one-time accident, it's a one-and-done deal. Other people are saying that they need a little bit more info on this. Looking at tracer fire shooting up directly in IL-62 was not good enough, and some others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Are you thinking that this is an accident waiting to happen, or do you think that this is more so of a one-and-done incident, and this will never happen again?
So it looks like the vast majority of the audience, about 87%, said it's an accident waiting to happen, while only 4% said it's just a one-time incident, and 6% said I need more info on it. And of course, Russia has a very, very bad history when it comes to accidentally shooting down commercial airliners. They did shoot down the MH17 flight, the Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, back in 2014. They shot it down with a surface-to-air missile, which was a little bit different than this current incident because, of course, this time they were using tracer fire to shoot at a different Aleutian-type aircraft, which was not quite the same as the last time. But they do have a history of doing that. So certainly not a good thing. Honestly, I think it is an accident waiting to happen. And as these Ukrainian drone attacks start becoming more frequent on the Russian countryside and also Moscow as well, I think that's going to increase the odds of a commercial airliner getting shot down. So not very good. One thing I will note, though, is the Aleutian that we saw that was being shot at by the tracers also happens to be one of the same type of Aleutians the government of Russia happens to use to transport its officials that we saw the other day fleeing from Moscow. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. The model of aircraft was almost identical to what we saw fleeing Moscow yesterday. So I'm not saying it's the same type of aircraft. We really don't know what airliner that was operating that flight that was being shot at, but that is a bit of an interesting coincidence. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that this is an accident waiting to happen. Russian air defense is poorly trained and appears to be very bad at visual identification of incoming crafts, which means that there is going to be room for an accident here. Considering that they weren't able to identify, and let me see here if I can get you all the dimensions of the IL-62 that they were firing at here. Yeah, Steve written a lot about this. Yes. I see you know your Aleutian well. Good one. And you, sir, would you like to receive my limp air defense? How dare you, sir? Oh, yeah, by the way, Air Koryo does operate two IL-60Ms. Those are what they look like.
Air Koryo. Now, that would be interesting if they shot down an Air Koryo flight. That would also be devastating to Air Koryo because they only have, I think, a few of those.
They only have two of these, and I was able to fly on one to Pyongyang in North Korea. But anyways, moving on from that and further on down, let's get to the dimensions of the aircraft. So, this aircraft is 174 feet long. So, it's quite a large aircraft. Many of y'all can tell, because 174 feet is quite some distance there, or it's about half the length of a football field, so this is a pretty big plane. Now, on the difference, a Liudi long-range drone is only about 6 or 8 feet long. I don't know the exact dimensions, but it is about 100 times smaller in length than the length of an IL-62. So quite clearly, it doesn't appear that this would be something that you could easily misidentify. You're looking for small drones. The Ukrainians aren't flying in commercial airliners as giant bombers. That just doesn't happen. So apparently they mistook the two, which lets us know that their identification abilities are literally non-existent. Anything that's flying could be a target, meaning that other Russian aircraft could also be a target as well. Russian military aircraft, that is. So we will have to see if this starts to happen more, but I think it is an accident waiting to happen. Also, by the way, this livery for the Czechoslovakian Airlines from the communist period, that is a really weird thing to put on the tail fin is OK Jet. It's what's the service like? It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It works, at least. We might not have enough spackling to fix the wings, but it works.
Dude, Czechoslovakian Airlines, it's okay. That's their motto. It's bro, I wouldn't fly on a plane like that. It's bro, dude, imagine American Airlines doing something like that. It's how's the service? It's all right. It's bro, that would be an honest marketing slogan though. But anyways, with that, also, wow, this is an IL-62 of the Sudanese government. I like the guy that they have sitting out there next to the plane in the school chair. I like that. That's really a vibe. And I also
And also, by the way, look at that twin engine fuselage mounted jet turbines. It's kind of interesting to have two of them mounted to the fuselage like that.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, this is actually a pretty archaic kind of a jet configuration or jet design, because the the Soviets never really figured out the whole turbofan thing on the jet engines, which is a little bit interesting with that. So let me show you all that. A turbofan. Let me go get this, because there is a significant difference between the two. So this is a turbofan engine. This is the one that all of y'all would know about in domestic commercial airline service or even international airline service. But then there is also the turbojet, which is, let's see here. Let me go get this, so that way we can make sure to show the difference. This is a turbojet. And what's interesting about these is that you can tell that one's a lot smaller in diameter than the other. And there's a very interesting reason for that, and there's also a very interesting technological innovation that is inherent in that. A turbo fan almost works like a jet-powered propeller plane for the large part, interestingly enough. The jet itself is still a turbojet, you can see right there. It is a turbojet, but the very front set of turbines is actually a large fan, which greatly increases the amount of thrust over the engine size. It's not necessarily made for wildly high speeds, but it is made to be a lot more fuel efficient and also quieter for the amount of thrust. On the other hand, a turbojet engine is literally just raw power with no additional thrust that would be provided by the large turbine set that we see here on the turbofan. These are insanely loud and produce a decent bit less, I guess you could say, pounds of thrust, at least at lower speeds, than any other kind of a turbofan would provide. In short, these are insanely loud compared to those of the turbofan, and the Soviet Union never really figured out how to create a turbofan jet engine, while here in the West, we easily figured that out. So they, to the final days of the Soviet Union, were producing every single aircraft with turbojet engines, meaning they were loud as shit, they were very fuel inefficient, and also these things have an interesting tendency to fail, and it's also a little bit more difficult to repair the engine nacelles that are the furthest away from the fuselage for a myriad of reasons. Generally, Soviet aircraft and even modern-day Russian aircraft that have been able to finally get turbofan engines also suck. But anyways, outside of that whole explanation there, you can kind of get the picture. These things aren't really the greatest. But still, with that, we are going to be moving on from this little bit of news and that little bit of information about the specific design and variant of the IL-62. But we are going to be moving on into the remainder of the drone attack news that we also got through the course of the day, as we were able to hear that a train, well, this wasn't really drone attack news, but near to the area of Belgorod, a train was hit with a bomb. Apparently, some Ukrainian partisans were able to set up a bomb on a train or on the tracks, which blew up under the train, which is fairly interesting. And it is, of course, the ugliest ones that could be imagined that got blown up. So nothing was really lost of value. But from what we understand, an entire engine was taken out today by the explosion. This isn't going to be a massive loss. This is the first time, though, that we've ever heard of a locomotive being taken out of service on a Russian railway by a Ukrainian railroad bombing or a Ukrainian partisan railroad bombing, but it's not going to be causing that much of an issue. Railroads, including the Russian state railways, are designed to have a lot of engines being put out of service for one reason or the other for general maintenance, meaning that there are always spare locomotives that will be able to take this one's place on the railroads. As far as it goes with attacking logistic structures, attacking railroads is one of the more difficult ones to actually be able to cause any real permanent significant damage to. Roadbeds are easily destroyed by cratering them with bombs. Naval pads can be easily destroyed by destroying the port facilities that load and offload cargo, specifically the cranes at the ports. Railroads, on the other hand, have very few weak points, and really the only ones that you can find are railroad bridges. And even still, those are fairly difficult to knock out because they're usually made of incredibly strong materials because of the weight that has to be supported by the passing train overhead, meaning that it's a lot more difficult to knock the Russian railroads out of service than it would be Russian roadways or air bases that use road beds that have to be incredibly smooth to be able to be operated properly. Nevertheless, we are going to be moving on from that interesting news that came out of Belgorod today and further on up towards the area of Tula, as we were also able to see that the city of Tula did come under direct attack. That's actually a duplicate clip from the one near to Bela Yuga, but from what we were able to tell, that did occur in Tula. Meanwhile, further on up towards Moscow, we were also able to hear that air defense was active around the area, and according to the Russians, they had already shot down a large amount of Ukrainian drones, although all airports around Moscow were closed, but we do not believe that they were able to shoot down all of them. We haven't gotten a lot of video and picture evidence yet out of Moscow, but it does appear that the air attack was able to hit some targets within the city. Meanwhile, we also were able to hear that the Russian Federation is now returning back to their old tactics, as Lavrov is now saying that Ukraine must hold elections before any ceasefire or peace deal can be made with the state of Ukraine. Once again, demanding that the state of Ukraine violates their constitutional laws to hold an impromptu election for the Russians alone, so that way they can make sure to pretty much rig the government to become a puppet regime of the Russian Federation before peace negotiations even begin. We have also been able to hear that at the same time, the Russian Federation has been attacking the state of Ukraine today And we have been able to hear that, concerningly enough, according to open source intelligence, it appears that the Russians' ability to produce their own Garan 2 Shahed 136 license-produced drones is beginning to increase, as they apparently are now able to produce somewhere around 300 Shahed drones. Well, actually, they're producing around 300 Shahed drones every 3 days, meaning that they have an average production cycle of 100 new Garan 2 drones every single 24-hour period. This is starting to make it a lot more plausible for the Russian Federation to keep up a high intensity of air raids onto the state of Ukraine, because they will have a large available pool of FPV and kamikaze drones to be able to conduct these attacks with. It appears that we will most likely be seeing over the next few weeks and months that air attacks of large varieties, encompassing over 100 to 200 drones against the state of Ukraine, may become a common nightly occurrence, meaning that air defense abilities for the state of Ukraine are more important now than they've ever been. For the large part, both sides understand that this is now an ongoing war of attrition, and the one who is able to destroy the other's economy, and therefore their ability to wage war through finance, is going to be the one that comes out on top and is the one that's going to win. With the Russians now being able to produce and field a large number of drones, sometimes in the hundreds per day against the state of Ukraine, and this means that the Ukrainians have to be able to strengthen their air defense with a larger variety of anti-air guns, self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, and surface-to-air missile defense systems to deal with larger, high-priority targets such as Iskanders, Calibers, and the like. It does appear at this point we'll most likely be trying to see, or we most likely will be seeing, that the state of Ukraine will begin to lobby heavily or request heavily from Western countries the provision of air defense systems of a myriad of types, so that way they will be able to deal with the incoming Russian attacks a lot more efficiently than they will be able to at the moment, as the air defense will eventually get overwhelmed if these kinds of number increases continue to go on. Nevertheless, we have also been able to hear inside of Ukraine, speaking of these ongoing attacks, that the Ukrainians were able to shoot down, funnily enough, a KH-101 today with a MiM-23 Hawk, which is a really cool air defense system. Very old, but really cool. And here's the clip. And there it was.
Oh,
an impressive
wow.
hit.
That was impressive. That was a nice interception.
Man, it was a really nice interception. The missile that actually intercepted that KH-101 was a MiM-23 Hawk. And let me go show y'all that, because I always love this system. It's very retro.
Oh, that's the Looney Tunes looking thing. The one
Yeah.
that we used to give Ukraine a lot of, like about a year or two ago.
Yeah, everyone gave them a load of these things, and they are really cheap because they're ancient. I believe these things were first put into service in the mid-50s. Actually, it was put into service in 1960, so it was actually put in service in time for the Bay of Pigs invasion, to give you all an idea of how old this system is. Nevertheless, a lot of them have been upgraded over the years, with some of the latest upgrades being done in the mid-80s. These things are fairly effective against incoming air targets, even still to this day, especially the ones that the Ukrainians are having to deal with so far. And we were able to see one of them actually conduct a successful interception, at least in that clip, which is really cool. And I like to see that the MiM-23 still has a purpose and a use out there in the world, even in this modern day and age. We also were able to see, unfortunately, major impacts hitting Chernihiv overnight, which we were able to see in this clip right here. That is a significant explosion inside of downtown Chernihiv, and we have not gotten any casualty reports at the moment, but we do assume that some may have been wounded and killed. With that, we're going to be moving on into our next bit of news, where we have also been able to see that there has been a decent air defense report over the area of Ukraine recently. On May 24th to the night of May 25th, Ukraine was able to attack 298 drones, 9 Iskander missiles, 55 X-101 and calibers, 4 X-59s, and 1 X-22. 127 drones and 2 X-59s were suppressed with electronic warfare measures and did not reach the target, meaning that there was a decent amount of incoming air targets that were taken down. But let me do the exact math here for all of y'all, so that way we can make sure that we know exactly how many of them made it through, because it was a significant attack last night, comprising 367 Russian drones and missiles, meaning if we were to add the 45 missiles with the 139 drones and the other 127 of all types that were taken down through electronic warfare measures, that means they were able to shoot down 311 of the 367 surface-to-air missile defense system, well, actually, the incoming drones and missiles that were shot down at that time. Meaning, and let me make sure that we do this really quickly, that 56 drones and missiles were able to make it through the air defense overnight. That is, of course, a significant number. And while the Ukrainian air defense was able to shoot down a great number of the incoming air targets, 56 drones and missiles making it through to their targets is going to cause a fairly significant amount of damage. Still, it does appear that the Ukrainians are going to be trying their best to continue to defend their skies, no matter the difficulty and no matter the challenge, so that way they can make sure to keep the Ukrainian economy and the Ukrainian military running as best as they possibly can, and to make sure that the war effort keeps on rolling. Nevertheless, we have been able to hear that a lot of people have reported a train in Belgrade exploded after a bomb was detonated on the trackbed below. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts, and it appears that a decent amount of people are saying that it's Ukrainian saboteurs that made it into Belgrade. Others are saying that it's probably Russian partisans that conducted this action. Some others are saying that it seems a little fishy, and others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So there was a train that was exploded by a bomb planted on the tracks. And who do you believe did it? So it looks like 61% said Ukrainian saboteurs made it all the way into Belgrade, was able to plant the bomb, and then remotely detonated it, while 25% said it was probably Russian partisans that did the entire attack. And 6% said it seems a little bit fishy. I think there might be more to the story. And honestly, with it being Belgrade, it is very plausible that Ukraine made it all the way into that territory inside of Russia and was able to pull this off. But at the same time, though, it would be much easier for the partisans to do it since they are already inside of Russia. They don't have to make it through all the defenses and all the other networks that Russia has throughout Belgrade. So me personally, I would say it's probably Russian partisans. They were probably the ones who pulled this off. I'm actually with the 25% that were in that category, just because it would be a lot easier for them to pull that off than the Ukrainian saboteurs. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it actually might be Ukrainian saboteurs, considering that there is an ongoing offensive inside of the Belgrade area at this moment by Ukrainian special forces, and we have been able to hear that Ukrainian special forces have also breached behind the lines and are conducting partisan-style raids and attacks against Russian forces. These aren't really talked about a lot, filmed, or really shown a lot, because they are generally considered to be classified operations. And even long after the operations have been completed, it is very rare for the Ukrainians to show any footage from them. However, it is highly likely that an area near to a Belgrade railroad district could have been attacked directly by Ukrainian partisans of the Ukrainian Special Forces in an attempt to blow up a locomotive. That would be a significant loss for the Russian Federation. These locomotives, while easily replaceable, at least at the moment, would be pretty hard to repair, especially considering if the explosive blows up right underneath it and leads to a serious derailment, especially at mainline speeds. It most likely would lead to a bending of the frame, which may render that locomotive completely unusable, and it will most likely be sold for scrap. Meaning that if they're able to destroy one of those locomotives in that kind of a style, then that means it's being knocked out permanently. And also considering that a lot of Russian industry has completely shifted over into wartime production or is currently folding at the moment, Russia's ability to produce new locomotives to use on their railroads is most likely greatly diminished, meaning that replacements would be a little bit more hard to find. Still, I think that it would most likely be Ukrainian partisans that made it into Belgrade, considering the ongoing raid near to the border region at this moment. But I hope that does address that well. And in the meantime, I've got to mention that the fundraiser that we're running tonight has made it to nearly $1,600 at this point, and it's only $900 short of the fundraiser goal. Holy smokes, I gotta say,
very nice.
Absolutely amazing stuff right there. And we love to see that the fundraiser is getting on up there. And hopefully we will be able to see that it gets all the way up there to the very tippy top of the fundraiser goal of $2.5 thousand. Can we make it? Can we make it, the LSA? I know we can make it, because we have never missed a fundraiser goal in the history of the Lee Spring Army. But with that, we are about to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have tonight. But before we get into all of that news, I want to make sure that we take a moment here to speak to all of y'all. You said I could speak. No, sir, I didn't say that. Please step in the car. I'm under what? But beyond that, we are going to take a little moment to talk to all of y'all. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our top donors of the night, we want to hop into top donors or the questions?
Top donors would be great. Marvelous.
All right, so to list off our top donors for the night, we did have a very generous $100 donation from Hal Rose, as well as a massive 100 from Snow White, as well as David
Hey!
Dornblaser, as well as a 100 from Just Chillin' and Darth Egregious. We also had a 50 that just came in from Samuel Sizamanski, as well as a 75 from Old Warrior, and a 50 from Nightmare Before Christmas, as well as a 50 from Rat Doctor, Blink343, and also Axel K threw in a 50 as well. And right now, we are currently up to about $1,625 raised, which is well beyond halfway to the goal. So we are getting super close, and we're somewhere in the neighborhood of less than 1,000. I think like 850 or something like that until we hit the goal. So getting very close and tremendous progress. But Enforcer, what say you?
And we are getting amazingly close. It's getting to be not that far away from the actual fundraiser goal and hitting it, and hopefully we will be able to hit that incredibly soon. It's an absolutely amazing thing to hear that so many people have supported the fundraiser tonight. We heard a lot of names of old guards and channel legends who have come through to support this fundraiser tonight, and hopefully through the entirety of the Lee Spring Army combined, all the donations, big and small, we will be able to see that we surpassed that $2.5 thousand goal and continue to see that the Lee Spring Army has never missed a fundraiser goal and continues to support American and Western interests around the globe in a way that actually impacts those stories that we are covering tonight. But nevertheless, I got to give a huge thanks to all of y'all once again. I hope that does address that the best I possibly can. But before we move on into the rest of the news, I also want to make sure to grab a couple of questions as well. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have a lot of good live chat questions right now as we speak. And also, just a quick note, if you do have a live chat question for us and you want us to address it on the stream, there's a pretty good chance that tonight we can address a ton of them since it is a fundraiser night. But if you want to tag me in the chat, at Enforcer Matt in the chat, and then put your question behind it, I'll add it to our spreadsheet, and we might be able to get to most of them tonight. So if you have a question, send it that way. But jumping into our first one of the night, this one goes to Mason Miami, who said, what do you think that they are trying to go and try to do from all of this? And anyways, LSA.
And what does he mean by it? What are they trying to, like, there's a lot that a lot of people are trying to do.
I think he's referring to the massive drone attacks. I think he's asking, what do you think the objective is behind these massive drone attacks? It's gone on for 5 days straight. What do you think the objective is?
I believe that the objective would most likely be to hit Russian military strategic targets and also economic industries vital to keeping Russia and the economy alive. That's what I would largely think, because those are the targets that we've seen being hit recently. There's been a lot of military facilities and key factories that are being destroyed, so it appears to be a concerted effort to just really destroy Russia's economic abilities and the war industry, along with any military targets along the way, all in one fell swoop. But pretty much to try and attrition them in the only way that is possible at this point, because attrition through actual frontline action seems to be near to impossible at this point for both sides to achieve any kind of a major positive gain. So I would have to say that in my opinion, I think it's largely just a campaign of attrition trying to strike those three key sorts of targets. But I hope that does address that incredibly well. Really good question. Sorry I didn't understand the first time. I didn't know what it meant, because I was like, there's a lot of things going on. I don't know what anyone's trying to achieve through all of them, but on each one we can give a pretty good answer. And so with that, a big thanks to you.
Oh, wait a minute. This is a plot twist. Mason Miami was actually trying to decode the Morse code for the night. That was actually a Morse code message right there. So while we're at it right now, in honor of Mason Miami and his first attempt to crack the Morse code, I didn't know what he was putting that in for. I thought he was asking a question. So and if you put in the beginning, by the way, Mason, I will actually know it was the Morse code. If you say the Morse code to code is, I'll add your name to the sheet. But from this point forward, though, we do have Cliff Simonson tonight, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, Dave Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, Errol Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said the Morse code says literally what Mason said. He said, what do you think they're going to do from all this? Anyways, LT, LSA.
And ding, 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 ding. I just sat there and said, well, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
It was your own Morse, man.
Yeah, it was my own Morse code message. If it was said that there was the Morse code message, I would be like, but that is actually the correct Morse code message, Mason Miami. You got that dead on the nail. I didn't really know what to put there tonight, so I just put something random, and you actually got it right, and then I thought it was a legitimate question, and I was like, well, that's really vague. I was like, what kind of question is that? It's my own question, and it was a stupid question. I will have to actually be honest on that one, and I didn't know what to put there, so I just put the dumbest one I could. It was just something like, what's going on over there, huh? You know, or something like that. But still, a big thanks to you. Congratulations for deciphering that. And a big congratulations to the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for also getting that correct as well, because that was the Morse code message of the night, and I absolutely ran out of ideas for that. Like, if y'all are wondering, what kind of a message is that? Like, it's a terrible one. It was a bad one. But I had to put a fresh one there because we put a fresh one there every single night. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know about my own Morse code message, which was a pretty bad one. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next question.
All right, our next live chat question goes to Jason Curling, who said, will the Germans give Ukraine that Taurus missile? Also, by the way, I want to address this one a little bit myself. People on Twitter today were going berserk and really attacking the new German chancellor about not sending the Taurus missile. But the truth is, we don't know if they've sent it or not. Germany recently passed I think a resolution or a law or something like that, saying that they're going to keep all future weapon shipments going to Ukraine a classified secret. They're not going to publicly announce it, and that's likely because they are probably going to end up sending the Taurus, and they don't want to give the Russians the heads up that they've showed up. So we'll never know until it actually hits the Kerch Bridge or something like that if they actually are using Taurus. And the Germans are not going to announce it. So we don't know. I think they are going to give them the Taurus eventually, probably, because the new chancellor did make that commitment. And unless he's going to just be a complete liar, then I think it's going to probably be sent very soon. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it is probably going to be sent quite soon. Like Matthew's saying, the Germans did classify all of their weapon shipments to the Save Ukraine from this point onwards. We were able to hear that a while ago. We actually reported it here on the channel. So it's not like we're going to be getting a up-to-date feed on what they're sending, because that would be kind of breaking the whole it's classified deal that the Germans have laid out now about their arms shipments to Ukraine. So I've just got to say really quickly, people on Twitter have got to pay better attention, because a lot of people are really grilling the Germans today for that. And it's like, y'all aren't going to be hearing that the Germans are sending anything because all of it's classified now. It's like, people have got to be up on the ball on that kind of stuff if they're wanting to criticize someone. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, but I think they are going to be getting Taurus missiles. I think it's a pretty certain thing at this point. The Ukrainians have already gotten the Storm Shadow, the Scalp EG, and the Attackums, and the Taurus is pretty much the German version of the Scalp EG or the Storm Shadow, so it wouldn't be that far to say that they are going to get one, but I also have to say that I would not expect it to be a war-changing weapon. As a matter of fact, I would expect it to change very minimal things about how the actual frontline war is going right now. There is no such thing as a Wunderwaffe. Now, things do help. Certain kinds of weapon systems give a little bit of an edge, but it's not going to be one where it's like a movie where, you hit them in the Achilles heel and then you drop over dead and then you win. That's not going to be happening. The Taurus will be able to strike farther behind the lines and will be harder to detect and shoot down than other kinds of missiles, even the Scalp EG and the Storm Shadow, but that does not mean that it's going to be completely changing the war. It will most likely knock out a key headquarters here and there, and also an ammunition depot or a major supply hub, but beyond that, it's not going to be doing a great deal to be changing the war entirely. There's always a load of things that go on out in the world that make people think that a weapon is going to change the way war is fought, or there's a lot of people who act like when one of them gets destroyed that it's a big deal. Generally on both sides, I've seen that a lot of pro-Ukrainian people want to act like every single new weapon system is literally going to crush the Russians just on its own without anything else, and then the Russians act like when they finally shoot one of them down after a year of them being in service, that it's an act of God and Western weaponry sucks. Everything in war will eventually get lost. There is no such thing as an unsinkable ship, and there's no such thing as an indestructible tank, or a completely survivable aircraft. There is no such thing as that, and there never will be. That is also the same for this missile. There will never be a truly war-changing weapon in its own, and the Taurus will not be it. It will do a lot to help out, but it's not going to be a massive war changer, and also, the other thing is that one of them will eventually get shot down. That's just the case with everything. An F-117 was shot down over Serbia, of all places. It doesn't get shot down anywhere else, doesn't get shot down in the Gulf War, doesn't get shot down in any of the times it was used after the situation in Serbia, but it got shot down over Serbia, which kind of gives you all an idea anything can be destroyed and anything can be shot down. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, but I'll have to say, we don't know when the Taurus will be provided. The only moment that we will know if the Taurus has been provided to Ukraine is when Ukraine uses one and we are able to confirm it. And so I hope that does address that question the best I can. And we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
And this one goes to Andy 4C. And he said it should have been classified for all in the first place, meaning all the aid being sent to Ukraine should have been classified in his opinion. And Russia doesn't advertise who's given them what, so why should we?
And that is a great question, Indy Andy 4C, and it is a divide between the Western democratic world and the dictatorial Eastern world, or more so the Chinese bloc, because the Russians are really a part of that. Here in the West, all of our countries are democratically operated or elected, and this means that there are a lot of elected representatives who want to show to their constituents that they are doing something or they're providing some things, and they want to be transparent about that so that way they can gauge the public and see if they like the amount that they're sending or if they think they should be sending more. Another thing that's also important about that is just the transparency that is expected in the Western world these days by our own governments, and this is why a lot of countries have gone out of the way to pretty much violate operational security to publicly state a large number or pretty much everything that they're sending to the state of Ukraine. On the other hand, the Russians don't publish that information because they're not beholden to the citizenry at all. It's a dictatorship, and any of the countries that are providing them with support are also dictatorships as well, like North Korea and China, and so for that reason, they don't have to provide any information about anything because it's not like they're being held accountable by the citizenry or have a high level of expected transparency inside of their national governments. So that's generally the reason why you'll see those two sorts of differences, but nevertheless it is true that providing that information publicly does violate a decent amount of operational security and can start to cause major issues further on down the road, because the Russians will be able to know exactly how many different kinds of systems and what types the Ukrainians are getting access to from the West. There have been very few that actually were classified. For example, I believe the ATACMS missile was classified until it was actually used in Ukraine, that the Ukrainians had got them. But there have also been some other systems, very few, that have had that same sort of treatment, but also the AGM-88 Harm was one of the most famous ones early on in the war, but most of them are publicly listed and spoken about. And so I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion, with how all of that's been going on so far, and the reasons why it's all published and pretty much spoken of here in the West, and it's not inside of Russia and the Chinese bloc. But moving on from that and out of the question segment, because I think that was the final question of this question segment,
Yes.
we are going to be moving on into the remainder of the news for the night, as the fundraiser is sitting at nearly $1,800, which means that we're only about $700 away from the fundraiser goal, and hopefully we
Very
will be
nice. Very nice.
very nice, and hopefully we will be able to hit that soon. Moving on from that, though, and into the remainder of the news, as I just heard Matthew breathe in through his nose on the microphone there, that was very
Oh
loud.
yeah, just a little sniffle. Actually, there's a little air, a little sniffle.
Bro, I was sitting there talking, and then all I heard was, and I was like, oh. I was like, okay. Like, I don't know if you could hear that
I
on the
could be
microphone.
like that person that gives speeches and they go, "Thank you very much."
No, wait, man, you gotta do the ideal.
No,
Like,
that was. Listen. What was that I smell? Anyway.
is that ice cream, Jack?
Oh my God! Oh crap! Back up!
Oh, man. Anyways, it's time for us to move on into the remainder of the news for tonight. We still got a good amount of it. Moving on up into the area of the Gulf of Finland, we have been able to hear that the Russian Navy, or specifically the Baltic Fleet, is beginning to escort shadow tanker vessels in and out of the Baltic. This is one of them, and it's called the Donut. They're like, that's when you want a donut and then someone's like trying to be a little bit funny. You're like, can I have that donut? And they're like, haha, do not. And then they pretty much, make a pun on the word donut and pretty much telling you don't take their donut. But beyond that, the Russians have begun escorting their shadow fleet vessels using ships from the Baltic Fleet, according to Finnish Defense Minister Antti Hakkinen, according to a statement that he made today, showing that it's going to be a lot more difficult to stop and seize these Russian vessels that are transiting in and out of the Gulf of Finland at this current moment. However, it also appears that the Russian Federation is running into some further difficulties elsewhere throughout the world, as we were able to hear today inside of the front lines of Ukraine that the state of Ukraine is continuing to pound the Russians quite heavily. We were able to see what can only be described as the highway of hell here in the Sumy Oblast, a small area that Russia has been able to hold here for a couple of weeks, which is littered with the remains and ruins of destroyed Russian vehicles. Here are just a few of them. That's a Buhanka. Right up there, that's a lot of Neva in the middle of the street that was burned out. And right there is a couple of other vehicles that we can't even tell. That's one of those Chinese mules. There's another one. and a whole bunch of other lot of Nevas and a UAZ, and a Euro 4320 out there in the field. And there's another Bahanka over to the left. But that was just in a small 25-second clip or so that all of those vehicles have been destroyed on that single street. Kind of giving you all the idea that it's a fairly dangerous place and a fairly dangerous occupation for the Russians to be in the Sumy Oblast, at least for right now. Moving on out of that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting the Russians in Kursk through the 103rd Territorial Defense Forces Brigade. And we can see here that the 103rd is taking their time to line up these hits and to make sure to drop them in the most damaging places, like the cab of the vehicle, as a 100 just came in from an anonymous viewer. Holy smokes.
Wow. Let's go, Popeye. Let's go.
Let's go, baby! And also, we are up to $1,918 at this point, meaning that we are only $582 away from the fundraiser goal. We are getting incredibly close. And when you see the Ukrainians getting incredibly close onto those Russian positions and flying those drones right down into them.
Also, while we're watching this, big shout out to Juan and McIntosh and also Dad Good, by the way. They each threw in a $50 donation
Holy
to the fundraiser and helped to bring us up to our current point. Just a big shout out to those two. And also, like the Enforcer said, the fundraiser is still going very strong. So donate if you can to help Ukraine.
Amen, I say so. And moving on from that and further down the way towards the area of Kazinka, near to Gravuran and Glotovo, which is actually a place that was significant at a time. Let me bring y'all down memory lane here for a minute. Back in the day, back in about late 2023, there was this group called the Free Russian Army and the Russian Volunteer Corps, which, funnily enough, I think they've disappeared off of the face of the planet because I've never heard about them since then. But the Free Russian Army and the Russian Volunteer Corps were both units of the Ukrainian army that were made up entirely of Russian volunteers. And they conducted an offensive towards the town of Kazinka and into Grivoron, and actually made it as far in as Golovchino, which is right next to a Russian nuclear warhead storage facility right here. From what we know, the Russians did successfully evacuate the nuclear warheads before the Free Russian Army, as we were calling them, made it into the area. But it is really interesting to see, really wild to see actually, that this area is being talked about again, because this was once the time that we thought that a actual Russian civil war might begin, and of course it didn't. It never did, because the Russians are a little bit scared and a little weak, really. But beyond that, we were able to see that around the area of Glotovo, more Russian positions were getting bombed today by the state of Ukraine using AASM hammers, and we could see Glotovo right here in the satellite view as they're about to take a little bit of a pounding. The Russians were up there on their tiny post, and they were getting pounded.
Absolutely pounded. Send in a drone strike.
Hit them with that double tap, the way they made me look twice. God. But anyways, moving on from that and on.
Oh, they must be from Iraq, the way they bagged that ass up. Damn.
Anyways, moving on from the area of Kazinka and that significant impact there that we saw in that town, we are going to be moving on into our location unknowns, which were also very interesting, because we actually got to see what appears to be the Ukrainian aircraft that actually dropped those bombs onto Kazinka today. This is a Ukrainian MiG-29 going full afterburner and yoinking itself up into the sky to be able to drop off its hammers on its own airstrike, maybe even the same one that hit Kazinka today. But you see, after it dropped its bombs, it turns off the afterburners and starts taking a hard left to be able to get out of the airspace and to avoid any incoming Russian air defense fire. But that's the end of the clip. Still very impressive to see, and we love to know that the Ukrainian MiG-29s are still out there conducting those airstrikes as usual. Moving on from that and into the casualty report, we were able to see some pretty interesting losses over the course of the day. Holy smokes!
Got 7 Bobcats today. Look at that. We have 7 Bobcats. We have to know. But honestly, though, that's tremendous right there. I like that. A nice 7 vehicles down, like Mistisa said. I'm glad to see that Mistisa could negotiate us some nice fresh Bobcats today. It doesn't matter what brand they are. Kubota, John Deere, Caterpillar, Bobcat. It doesn't matter. But very nice 7 Bobcats. But Enforcer, tell us more.
And Enforcer Matt, was it right that when you were a kid at 9 years old, you rode a Bobcat from United Rentals?
Yo, you slid. How'd you know that?
You're Enforcer Matt. We have to know. We have to know.
Snap.
And you wouldn't believe it, but I brought you a gift. I brought you a little gift of a model Bobcat. Look, it's just for you. It's for you, Enforcer Matt, because you're Enforcer Matt. We have to know that you like
can
Bobcats.
I keep that?
Yeah, of course. Well, no, actually, I'm going to take that back after the interview.
That's the funny part. It's like the guest would be like, "Hey, can I keep that gift that you gave me?" Well, no, maybe. It's like, well, then it's not a gift. You just showed it to him, basically.
So I listened to him explain it, and I actually there's actually an explanation behind that. Some when he says it's a gift, then it's a gift. But if he's just giving something to you and he says it's not a gift, everyone just assumes it's a gift, but it isn't. Apparently, it's just for them to look at. So he actually explained that, and then I went back and watched one of his interviews, and I saw that he actually did that. Like when it was an actual gift, he would give it to him, and he would say it was a gift. But when he just wanted him to see something, he would just say, look at this," and then he would give it to him, and then they would just assume it was a gift anyways. So I was like, oh, okay, because there was this whole thing. If y'all don't know, I had watched this a little bit. In between the insane clown posse, you know who I'm talking about, Matthew, the Juggalo people, and him, and he gave them a record to look at, and they thought it was a gift, and then he took it back after the interview, and they thought it was a gift, so they thought he was Indian giving or something, but then he explained it later that he wasn't, and he loaned it from a national, I think it was a Canadian National Library or something like that of records to just show it to them. But anyways, moving on from all that, that's a rabbit hole for another time, maybe in the question segment here. But beyond that, Miss Nisa, keeper of the records, did put down a wonderful record keeping today. We missed the one from yesterday. For some reason, it just did not pop up. But today, it's at the very top, and we love to see it. Now, let's get into the numbers here. As Miss Nisa stated, that 190 drones is the 8th highest daily loss of the war, tied with the 9th of March of 2025. Ukrainian air defense also shot down 6 Iskander MKN-23 ballistic missiles launched towards Kyiv, and the vehicles are down, but it is nice to see 7 Bobcat skid steers lost, and it is a wonderful thing to see. It's an incredible thing to see. And of course, I've got to say that the numbers were very good. 1,020 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 11 APCs, 112 supply trucks, 2 main battle tanks, 68 artillery pieces, 190 drones, 1 MLRS, 6 cruise missiles, and 7 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, it was a pretty good day. And before we move on, I think I will take a moment to answer this one. Live Animal asked, Enforcer Matt, what's so special about Bobcats? I'll actually give you a little bit of the story behind that, because probably a lot of people who are new to the channel never really know why the Bobcats are a big thing. So this is not really a Bobcat. When these are being destroyed, we call them Bobcat skid steers, but they're not. They're actually special equipment vehicles, and that could be quite literally any kind of special equipment or special engineering vehicle that is lost on the battlefield. So it could be a trench digging vehicle, it could be a special movable truck-based crane, it could be anything like that. Those are largely what the special equipments are, and these can also include recovery vehicles like the Brim recovery vehicle. And let me go see if I can get that right here. Here we go. So this is also this is not a Brim, this is an MAA-2. Rest in peace to the guys up there in Lithuania who died in one recently a couple of months ago. But this would be considered a special equipment vehicle because it is not a main battle tank. It's more so of a specialized system or a vehicle. So these are what those really are, or those sorts of systems. But way back in the day, when we first started getting casualty reports here on this channel, we used the Kyiv Independence. And on the Kyiv Independent, they have a special little infographic, or kind of like a picture, portraying what each loss category kind of generally is. And for some reason, on the special equipment category, they picked up Bobcat skid steer. And so we don't really know why, but it's been that way the whole war. And when we first saw that, Matthew said, wait a minute, they're losing Bobcat skid steers? Because he was looking at the infographic picture. And then I said, well, it's not really Bobcat skid steers, but it is pretty funny to think that it is. And that's why the Bobcat skid steers are a big deal. Because for some reason, everyone found it funny that Matthew asked that question, and that they do have a Bobcat skid steer on the infographic. So from then on, we just own the joke, kind of like we did with everything else. And Bobcat skid steers are the big thing on the casualty report. Although, quite literally, no Bobcat skid steers have been lost over the course of the whole war from what we are able to know, except for, I think, a handful of them, like maybe less than 5. And also, this is really just a complete creation and fiction of the channel, but it is a pretty fun one, and we like to have a good laugh with it. So I hope that answers that for you, Live Animal, about why the Bobcat deal is a big thing here on the channel, and a lot of people who are old guards and channel legends, they all know about the Bobcat skid steer joke. It's a legend of the channel. But moving on from that, and out of the casualty report, it is time for us to move further on down the lines and into the area of Vovchansk, as we were able to see the Ukrainians were attempting to conduct actions to stop or slow the activity of Russian supplies and support heading into the area of the Vovchansk front. We were able to see them hitting a large amount of vehicle supply depots and others, and we were able to see right there on this vehicle to confirm the location that this has the Vovchansk offensive markings on the side, which is a diamond with a cross through the middle, which does confirm that this is near the Vovchansk front that the Phoenix unit is operating at. We were also able to see them knocking out multiple supply trucks here as well. And we can see them hitting the front of a Buhanka, a abandoned Euro 4320, also a KAMAZ.
Down with KAMAZ.
Man, I knew you were going to do it. I was going to say down with KAMAZ. We can also see them hitting another one and a Euro 4320. And another KAMAZ.
Holy
Crusher
moly,
guy
a
just threw in a
250.
250.
Look at that.
Oh, holy
No.
smokes. We're only $40 away. Crusher guy, when you threw in that 250, did you know that you were only going to get us $40 away from the fundraiser goal?
Did you know that when you maced those protesters, that those protesters were getting maced? What do you think mace equals freedom?
Do
I
you
only
think
put pepper on my plate.
Do you think that it is okay, Mr. Prime Minister, to mace protesters? What do you mean? Oh, we hit the goal!
Oh, we hit the goal!
Hey, we hit the goal, baby!
Goal. We smashed the goal! Look!
It's the fundraiser. We have to know the goal. And we hit the goal, people. We hit the freaking goal. That is absolutely crazy right there. We hit the goal, people. Put an LC in the chat. We've done it. We've done it again, folks. We've done it again. And right before Memorial Day, we hit the goal, people. We hit the goal. You know what they always say. The Leaf Spring Army is invincible and legendary and will never die. Long live the Leaf Spring Army, and the Leaf Spring Army will never die. I gotta say, it's an absolutely amazing thing to see that we hit that fundraiser goal as those Russians are hitting the dirt as their KAMAZ is getting destroyed, because it is folks like all of y'all who continue to ensure that American and Western interests are truly supported. Even if the government is not full in behind them yet, we, the LSA, are, and we will continue to make sure that American and Western interests are supported full on through our own strength and our own determination, because there are only one group of people that can determine the path of the West, and that is the Western people themselves. It's an amazing thing to see that we were able to hit the fundraiser goal tonight, and an absolutely incredible thing. A big thanks to all of you.
It may be down with KAMAZ, but the LSA knows how to get a fundraiser up. I'm telling you. It knows how to go up and stuff. That sounded kind of bad. I'm not going to lie. Kind of bad. But anyways, the fundraiser is doing tremendous. I love to see it. It's smashed goal.
It's bad wordage. We have to know.
It's so bad. I realized after I said it, that's not good.
And Enforcer Matt, on day 1087 of the stream, did you make a slightly sexual comment? Oh man, you know he slid.
Oh
he
man,
slid.
how'd you know? How'd you know? That's a shock.
You're Enforcer Matt. We have to know. But anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the Wolfhounds of Vovchansk firing off a mortar. And man, that do look like a wolfhound right there. That thing looks hungry. That thing looks like the kind of dog that you would see in North Birmingham. But anyways, you can see the mortar firing right here. And look at the flowers. The flowers, they're floating around everywhere. Bless you.
Excuse me.
But that's the end of the clip. Neat to see them firing the mortar. Moving on from that and on down towards the Drushina area inside of the Kharkiv Oblast near to Oskol River, we were able to see the Ukrainians hitting a Russian IFV. Here is IFV. It is a little vehicle. It looks like it might be a BMP. Oh!
Oh, my.
Holy smokes! That thing be cooking. And I tell you what, there's no cooking better than Russian cooking. They cook well. But anyways, interesting outro there. Piston head, maybe? Get it, folks?
That's a motorbike for a motorhead.
Get it? It's funny, cause it is. But moving on from that and on into a poll here, we were also able to hear that Russia has begun escorting Shadow Fleet ships using its naval fleet, specifically the Baltic Fleet, out of the area of the island of Kronstadt, which is right here, Kronstadt Harbor. Boom, these ships right here. And the question that all of y'all are having, posed to all of you at the moment, is how should NATO respond? And some are saying that NATO should shadow the ships and really scare the shit out of the ships. Others are saying that NATO should board and inspect them, and inspect the shit in the ships, and possibly inter them. Others are saying that nothing can be done, and those people are downers, and others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, What are people thinking about this fine conundrum that we find ourselves in, inside of the Gulf of Finland and in some limited areas of the Baltic?
All right. So the big question right now is what should NATO do in response to the Russian shadow fleet no longer being really a shadow fleet? It looks like the Russian Navy is now protecting these vessels and escorting them right to Russian ports. So that really takes away the shadow part of the fleet and turns it more into just the Russian fleet. So 54% said NATO should shadow those ships, while 35% said NATO should board and inspect them, and 6% said nothing can be done. And honestly, on this one, I'm going to be in somewhat of a controversial camp. I'm actually with the 6% that said nothing can be done because NATO, when they shadow the ships, they are not really able to do anything when they do that. Even if they catch them dragging an anchor, we still aren't going to do anything about it because unless we're ready to go to war with Russia and actually fight them directly, then all we can do is say, hey, they cut the cable. That's not right. And then Russia can say, piss off. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, thanks. But 35% said we should board and inspect them. That's not going to work. The Russian Navy is protecting those ships now, and if we did that in international waters, that would probably invoke a war. So unless we're ready for war, then the two main options are kind of pointless. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have an idea, folks. I get a way around this quite well. The Russian Navy at this point is only escorting them through the Gulf of Finland. So you know what we do? We seize them in the Strait of Denmark. There's going to be nothing that they can do at that point, and I think that would be a good move. Because you see, the international waters through this area are wildly small, and so all we have to do is send out the Danes, or the Germans, either one, or the Swedes, and say, divert your course by just a couple of degrees. As soon as they do that, they're right inside of the national waters of one of these countries, and then we can board and inspect the vessel, take our time looking at the papers, and go, oh, hold up. These aren't the right kind of papers here. This seems like Russian oil to me. You're going to have to come with us. And then we just start seizing them en masse. I think that would be probably the easiest thing to do because the only way that they can get to Ust-Luga is right through the Danish Strait, and we can get them there because the Russians are not escorting them that far, at least to this point. So I think we should end up boarding the vessels, but we should board them after the Russian escorts are gone. And they generally, from what we're hearing right now, are only escorting them through the Gulf of Finland and a little bit of the Baltic Sea, and then the Russian escorts stop and they return back to port. So that would be my take.
I think the Russians would move back their patrols to wherever you try to start intercepting them. They'd simply put ships there to start patrolling that area and escort them as well. Because what's kind of weird to me is the whole point of the Shadow Fleet is to evade sanctions. But now if the Russian Navy is actively escorting these vessels, that pretty much makes it clear as the bell. It's obvious at this point, even without having to connect the dots, that those are Russian ships. Or otherwise, they wouldn't be having the protection of the Russian Navy.
Yeah, that's a good point, but in the meantime, though, we could at least grab a few of them, because it would take them a little bit to change up what they're doing right now, so we could probably get 2 of those vessels, and then pound them indefinitely, either the Swedes or the Danes could, at this point. And then if they start to try and patrol them through, well, if they start to try and move through that area in their patrol, then we could start running into some issues, possibly. We would have to see how that would work, because then that could end up being a national sovereignty issue, even if it is an international shipping channel, for the Russians to bring their ship through that area and then also menace a country's patrol vessel while being inside of its own territorial waters. That might start to end up being a significant issue. But then again, you know, there's always another thing that can be done. If the Russians start trying to send patrols through the Strait of Denmark, then we just seize them through the Strait of Dover. Or we seize them in the North Sea. Or we seize
they
them
wouldn't
in the
go
Bay
to
of
that.
Biscay.
They wouldn't go near Dover, though, because, you know, that's the Hague. Like, the Russians are, like, allergic to that place. They won't go anywhere near it.
Dude, like, you just go, ooh, trials, oh, you know, and then they run away, like, they just go running for the hills. But
also, Bama FEV said, let Ukraine grease them in the port. I don't know, because those are civilian vessels, the ones transporting the oil. Those aren't Navy vessels, per se. So, I don't know. I think that might be taking a little bit too far, because those are just civilians on the ship. They are complicit in, once again, getting around sanctions and evading sanctions, but I think that might be a little too far.
I don't know. Ships in war are a target. Those are actually considered military targets, even the civilian ones. So you could hit them, but Europe couldn't. You'd have to send the Ukrainians to do it. But they still could. Like, the Ukrainians could do that on their own, and no one could really do much about it. So But the problem is, though, is that those drones would have to hit at the waterline or below the waterline to really cause any serious damage. So how do you make a drone that can actually cause... Wait a minute. I got an idea, people. I got an idea. What if... Okay, so hear me out, folks. I just had the idea. It's one of the greatest ideas that you'll ever hear. What if you had a drone that was specialized to attack ships in that manner? So it could fly long range with maybe a 50-kilogram explosive on board, which would be sizable enough to cause serious damage to a ship. You fly it up there, and then the bomb, the drone actually doesn't fly to the ship. It actually flies near it, and when it's almost about to impact, it drops a mine, pretty much, or a bomb, with a magnet attached. Assuming that the hull of the ship is magnetic, the mine is going to, well, the magnet is going to attach above the waterline, and the bomb can be connected to the magnet by some sort of a small cable or a rope, so that way the magnet can attach above the waterline where the drone was actually going to hit, but the bomb can actually fall into the water below, attached to the cable, which means that it'll be directly alongside the hull, and then it can explode and hopefully cause some damage or a breach to the hull of some sort. That might actually be a pretty interesting idea, because creating a torpedo would be a little tough. I see a lot of people saying that, and that would literally be the first go-to, but I was thinking about that, and to make a torpedo, it would have to have some form of propulsion, and propulsion would add a lot of weight to that kind of drone. So it might be easier to create some sort of a magnetically attached bomb with a spindle or a cable on it that allows for the bomb to actually drop below the waterline and detonate down there, so that way it's actually able to rupture the... Well, even still, it wouldn't cause that much flooding. You would have to have a bomb big enough to get through the double-sided hulls of modern-day vessels. So if a small bomb, like a 50-kilogram one, blew up near to the side of a hull, it would fill up the double-bottomed hull, but it wouldn't actually fill up the watertight compartments or cause any real significant sinking. The vessel would settle in the water a little bit more, but that would be about it. So you'd have to get... I think the
problem, though, is if Ukraine starts attacking these Shadow Fleet oil tankers, then that's going to encourage Russia to go and start destroying every single Ukrainian grain ship or transport ship that's ever leaving their ports, and they'll make a point to blow them up from that point forward, because I know Ukraine's doing it. So it would really result in a bad thing for Ukraine in return.
Yeah, that is true. It's a very difficult thing. I think we just have to go back to Europe would have to try and seize the tankers wherever they could without the Ukrainians doing anything like that. Because one, there might not be enough of a technological ability to do such a thing. And secondly, another issue that would be posed is that the Russians could start hitting grain ships, and then that, kind of screws everyone over. But anyways, moving on from that, I hope we were able to get into those interesting questions as well. And moving on further down the line and into the Sabotage forest, we also get to see these guys, while this loads here, shooting down a drone. Take a little gander. This is the first time I've ever seen a Ukrainian camera that looks like it's a potato. Like, the graphics quality is, like, non-existent. Oh! Little gunshots.
Над нами!
And we hear the drone. The Ukrainians are trying to find it. They're going to take it down.
Oh, look at
Oh my God! This boy had the hunting shotgun. Oh my God! Look at him.
Sounded like a cannon going off.
This is crazy. Oh!
Damn! Shooting like freaking. What did you shoot now? That thing slugs?
12 gauge bird shot, I guess, or maybe buckshot. But dang, that was crazy. He got that at the last second too. That was legendary, actually. That was pretty freaking cool. And man, I didn't see the shotgun he had the whole time, but then right here at the end, he just whips out Elmer Fudd's double-barrel shotgun and actually ends up landing the hits. I'm really amazed with that. That is actually really impressive right there.
I mean, he's got the Elmer Fudd.
Shh, be very, very quiet. I'm hunting Russians. Bam! That's a bam. But anyways, moving on from that, and further on down the way, and into the area Pokrovsk, we also get to see the Russians getting hit down here. This was done by Madyaz Birds. I'll only be able to show a little bit of the clip, because it's about 10 minutes and 20 seconds long. But we can see all the Russian vehicles here, and we can see Russians moving around them, confirming that this is an active Russian tree line for the large sense. And it appears to be a BM-21 Grad and a resupply vehicle. And here comes Worm Busters. And it looks like they're about to be busting worms.
Coming in nice and steady.
Aw, man, they're about to bust a worm. Aw, man. And here they go. Down into the bowels of the Ural. Oh, look, it's trying to swerve out of the way. Oh, looks like it's get out of control and it got hit anyhow. Oh, dang, they flipped the Grad. Oh, my God, they flipped the Grad right in the middle of the street. The Ural's on fire. It looks like the whole thing jackknifed, possibly. It did! Oh, my... dude, they spun out of control so hard they jackknifed the Grad and the Ural. And now they're going to take out the Grad. And here comes the hit. Boom, right on the launchers. And now the rockets inside are catching fire. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your squad that died. They get 5 big booms. Boom! Boom! Boom!
These the Costco guys.
Uh-oh, it's the Rusler. Oh, look, there they are! Yes, you can always tell a Russian position from a Ukrainian one because theirs always look like they're in a landfill somewhere operated by Waste Management. And we can see them unloading mortar shells out of the back of this pickup Buhanka, which is it should be a part of a Rodnik segment. And you see them just placing all of the mortar rounds in a nice tidy pile. Foreshadowing is being done here, folks, in this part of the video. And they're highlighting, are those anti-tank mines? They're anti-tank mines and mortar rounds right next to each other. Basically, the Russians are preparing for the 4th of July. And here it comes. It's a little bit early, but the 4th of July is here. Oh, there they are.
Pick of the selection of the nice pieces of explosives here.
They're like, do we want to hit the mortars or the anti-tank mines? And they're going for the mortars. Oh, this should be significant. Oh, my God!
Oh, that was a hell of a hit. Look at that. Through dirt and everything.
Bro, look, it flung that piece of, like, tin up into the trees.
That was massive.
That was huge.
Whatever bark was left on those trees is now stripped.
Man, I guess you could say that the Russians were barking up the wrong tree. Ah!
I guess you could say those trees were strippers.
The way they barked me coming off. Ah!
Those trees must be from Iraq.
And the Russians are pulling into this abandoned warehouse here, and here comes another Ukrainian drone that's flying like it's on a mission. Oh, and it is on a mission. It's flying right into the building that the Russians went in. Oh, and there's the vehicle. What type of vehicle is that, pray us tell? I can't tell. It's some newfangled contraption. Maybe a BMD? It's a BMD. Or is it? I've never really seen a Russian... Russian... ground forces equipment. Hold up, folks. I gotta go find out what that thing was, because I don't actually know how to identify that one. It's gonna be under the APCs. This is an APC. Wait a minute. Could it be a BMP-3 with additional armor add-ons? Let's go take a look. Because, you see, the thing that's throwing me off is that it has significant armor tiling on the sides, which you generally don't see on a BMP, or any other kind of Russian vehicle for that matter these days. So let's take a gander. So let's look at the wheelbase. That's probably the best way we'll be able to figure this one out. So it has 4 in the rear, and then 2 separated ones up front. So this does match the wheelbase of a BMP-3, but let me check, because I want to check this with a BMD, because that would be the only other one that I could think this could be. Where the hell is the BMD? Did they not include that here? They didn't, so let's go pull up a BMD forward. BMD fire. And here's a BMD4, and the wheelbase does not line up. So let's go pull up the BMP3, and let's see if we can find that armor add-on. Any armor add-ons available in these pictures? Any armor add-ons? Let's see. Do you have anything dairy-free? Do you have anything non-dairy? Anything gluten-free? Well, that seems to be kind of close to the armor add-ons that we were seeing there, but that is a model kit, and I'm trying to find a real example of this. I'm not finding any, but I'm going to assume it's a BMP3 because the wheelbase and the turret lines up. Anyways, they blew it up. Here's the clip. That thing looks wrong with that giant armor add-on package to it. It makes it look weird and chunky. En de bloem er rätt inte framgläses I cook.
All we need left is Mark Zuckerberg to sit in his lawn chair outside and say, "Hey guys, I'm in here and smoking these meats. I have an entire building as my smoker, and we're gonna put some Sweet Baby Rays on it." And I mentioned I'm smoking these meats.
But nowadays, man, he's based. He updated his personality. So now instead of sitting there and talking about smoking the meats, he's talking about smoking suckers or something like that. Like,
yo, bro, you gonna go smoke some of that protein?
Are you going to have that pure whey?
Yo, Alpha Chad, bro, like for real.
I really didn't want to censor YouTube. I mean, Facebook and everything. That was just something I had to do. It wasn't like I was really behind that or anything, or that I viewed my my users on the platform as shit, and then I sold all their data to Cambridge Analytica. None of that happened on my own volition. That was all because of someone else. Like, oh yeah, now we're gonna believe that. Okay.
And when somebody asks and they say, so Mark, so why did you change your whole persona and your look and everything? Like, why did you just change it? Oh, it's probably best for the shareholders if I became an Alpha Chad bro. It's like, oh, it's like, yeah, oh, is that right? But of course, his answer is a lot more political than that. He's not going to say like, oh yeah, an advertising or marketing agency decided to rebrand my entire image because I represent the entire company of Meta. He's not going to say that, but that's basically what happened.
Man, they had like an office meeting with him, and they had like a whole presentation. They were like, you see, if you change to a Chad Alpha, bro, it's going to help out our, polling by like 7 points. So you need to do this because it's actually better than what you're doing right now. There was like a whole scientific process that they went through for him to be who he is now. He didn't do that normally.
Not a bad idea, honestly. Like if I was trying to give some advice myself, I'd be like, yeah, go out there and like go climb a mountain, take some photos of it, go do some surfboard stuff, holding like a Bud Light or a beer or something like that. Maybe not Bud Light, maybe some other beer or something like that. And go take some pictures and look like an Alpha Chad. Eat some beef jerky and stuff. Act like you're a hunter. Just do all this stuff. Wear some chains. Just have the Alpha Chad look.
And then he went and did it, and for some reason, people actually started to buy it.
Yeah, and also align yourself with certain, ideologies and things like that. That'll work just fine.
Yeah,
like a dang chameleon.
Because folks, they really don't believe what they're saying. They're just saying it because they think y'all want to hear it. Yeah, that's how it works. That's the reality of it, folks. And that's something that always gets me, is that people really think that these people believe what they're selling. They aren't. But look at that BMP. That thing cooked.
Honestly, it's kind of interesting. The same thing that leaders of countries do to make sure that they are perceived a certain way is basically the same thing that company executives do nowadays to like change their public image. Because these days, like some founders like Zuckerberg, Musk, and people like that, they're not only the CEOs, they're also like the face of the marketing of the company, which is really risky because if all of a sudden they fall out of favor with the public, then the company falls out of favor, which is extremely risky. And it's never really been like that before in history until recently, when the CEOs become like public figures themselves and like, the face of it. Like they used to have like, for example, Rockefeller and all those guys back in the day, they were well known, but they weren't quite attached to the company quite like Musk is to like Tesla and other things like that. They weren't like the marketing face of it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting phenomenon that's going on these days, but I think it's all a part of the identity branding that's going on these days. Because what better way to create an identity for a company and to get that identity branding going than literally having an actual person with an identity as the face of the company?
Yeah, basically just a cult of personality to drive sales, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like how nowadays you can't like Nike shoes just because they're Nike shoes. You have to like subscribe to an entire ideology to buy Nike shoes. It's a really weird thing how that works. Because I remember back when I was a kid, identity branding and identity politics hadn't really become a thing yet. So the branding was just done on the quality of the product. Now the product can be shit, but people will still buy it just because they subscribe to the ideology of the company, which is a really stupid thing. Like, that's a stupid way to buy things.
It tells you something about psychology, and that for some reason, for in the modern day, people are looking for more purpose because they apparently are lacking purpose. So therefore, the identity branding is really appealing to a mass amount of people, as because they're looking for some like a purpose to fill their soul or something. That's really telling.
Yeah, it is a very kind of a telling thing. And it's interesting, folks, because we come on here onto the show at night, and while we're more hyped up than we normally are, we still are who we are. We don't change anything about it. And it's just weird to see that there a lot of people out there have to change everything about themselves, and it's really more of a blank template that they just apply a new face onto to make themselves more marketable. It's just a really bizarre kind of a thing. Anyways, we can see that the worm busters have just been knocking them out around here. And also I see a lot of people talking about Tesla. That's something like folks, if I run a company, like that, like I'm not really into the whole identity branding thing, like as far as like actually selling products. There is some identity branding that goes on here on this channel, just to be entirely honest. We're pro-American and pro-Western. So if you are a part of the Enforcer channel, you're pro-American and pro-Western. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We don't have any pro-Russians or pro-Chinese or pro-Iranian people in here, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm totally fine with having an identity branding that has to be with it has to deal with being a patriot. I'm totally fine with that. But as far as marketing a product, I don't think that there should be any identity branding at all. I think it should simply be, we make a good car. That's it. Like, don't get into anything beyond that. Just let the product speak for itself and the quality of the thing. But nowadays they just don't let that happen. Like if you buy something, you have to have like an identity attached to it now. Like you're buying all of this extra luggage, and I don't like that stuff. But anyways. Moving on from that and into the next clip near to Pokrovsk, we also get to see more Russian forces getting hit by drones as well.
Also not to harp on it, but just something interesting that I've noticed is that it seems to be the less religious a society becomes. I'm not commenting on whether or not that's good, bad, or whatever. Like you believe what you want, but the less religious a society becomes, it seems like the more susceptible it is for extremist ideology to start taking a hold in the majority of that society, and that's when this identity politics thing and also things like that start really becoming problematic for like the normal functioning of a day-to-day society like that. Of course, there are outliers like Iran, but I wouldn't say that the Ayatollah and that regime, that extremist, like authoritarian regime, that really doesn't represent the entire country at this point, because that like extremist rule of the mullahs, that is something that is being imposed by the government itself, whether or not the people like it or not. So I think it's mainly more applicable to democracies where you have like free speech and people can express themselves. However, people start to like lend their time and their effort to these extreme ideologies when they don't have the religion going on at the same time.
Well, I wouldn't say that like religion keeps extremism at bay, because religion in itself, when it devolves, becomes an extremism in its own form. Like the IRA in Ireland, which was wanting to unite all of Ireland under a Catholic leadership because the Irish are Catholics, by their definition. Although the Protestants in Northern Ireland, according to them, aren't even Irish, because they're not Catholics and they're technically not really Irish. Like even by the real definition, Northern Irish people or Ulsters are really more so English than Irish. Or, for example, any other kind of a major religious movement. Like, for example, the Catholic Church in its latter years of complete dominance in Europe before the era of Martin Luther was starting to become a fairly radical kind of a force in itself. So I wouldn't really say that religion keeps extremism at bay. I really think that any kind of an ideology can start to spurn into extremism, as long as there are the right kind of elements involved. Because hell, I mean, look at any kind of a thing out there, anything that anyone believes in, and find an example where at least one time that belief didn't go to the absolute extreme and become something that was completely destructive.
But take this for an example, though. Take this for an example. Let's take Iran for example. I'll try to make a simplistic one. If they right now they have, obviously there's Muslims. Is there any Christians in Iran that's publicly known, or is that not really a thing?
Pretty much none. I mean, it's like
So
0.1% or something.
So let's take a different country, for example. Let's say Lebanon. Obviously, there's Muslims there, there's Christians there, there's many other religions. And of course, you can believe what you want, generally speaking. But at the same time, though, imagine if you could wipe clean the slate across that country, like wipe everybody's beliefs clean, and everybody had a clean slate. And then one nutcase comes to power and starts sounding very, very persuasive and appealing, and they have this extreme ideology. Those people that now have the clean slate and have wiped that religion out of their system now are looking for a new purpose and something to fill their interest in their soul, and they're going to obviously start gravitating toward whatever that very appealing and persuasive ideology is. Whether or not it's destructive or constructive, they're going to be looking for something to replace whatever they just got the slate clean wiped of. So that's my theory. I think if you're able to do that, and it seems like America's having that issue right now. The slate is being wiped clean because they're sort of like, I don't know really how to describe it, sort of going for extreme politics and politicians and things like that. And they're not really believing in much of anything. It's just kind of all over the place.
I don't know. I don't know, because like with that, like not that I'm getting into religion here, and this is kind of on the borderline. The whole conversation is about breaking our no religion rule, but uh one political part, like so far from what I see, like I'm just going to speak a little bit frankly here about America. So far from what I see, one political party is perverting Christianity to its absolute extremes to make it pretty much fit its party ideology rather than what it is originally supposed to be, and the other party generally pretty much just kind of kind of panders a little bit to Christianity, but then also tosses it completely aside whenever they need to, and pretty much moves down its own path on its own. But one,
Oh,
but,
you,
but
go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
but one side clearly is pretty much, in my opinion, kind of turning morphing Christianity, at least in the United States, to fit its own means, or to fit its ends to its means, or something along those lines.
Yes, somewhat, but to sort of further my point, I was having a hard time putting into words earlier, but to further my point, though, notice the one thing that most authoritarians do when they actually gain power fully, they first of all have to persuade enough people, well, typically a majority of people, to follow their extremist ideology, and then afterward, after they finally get a strong enough foothold, they ban religion pretty much as a whole. Like, look at North Korea, you're not allowed to believe any religion except for the state. You can believe in Kim Jong-un or nothing, or you get severely punished. That seems to be what they do, is generally wipe religion out, because that's the only thing that prevents them from getting full control of a society, is if people have their own deeply ingrained beliefs, if it's religion or politics, whatever it is. If they're deeply ingrained enough in it, it prevents the authoritarian from getting a very, very strong majority and a foothold that they need to properly conquer the society. So that's personally what I think.
I would say it really can be caused by anything, because the Russian Empire was a majority Eastern Orthodox nation when the Russian Civil War began. There was no lack of Christians or religion of any type to be found in the Russian Empire when the Russian Civil War kicked off between the Bolsheviks and the loyalists to the Russian Empire. And yet, nevertheless, the revolutionaries, the communists, ended up winning. The Bolsheviks did, and they brought forward the Soviet Union's government. There was no lack of religion to be had there, and yet still an extremist government came into power and existed just through the force of arms and winning the Civil War alone. So I would really say it has nothing to do, like at least with, in my opinion, with extremism. It has nothing to do with having a strong founded religious base or not, because extremism can come out of religion, or it can even appear in the heavy presence of a religion or a lack of one, or anything in between. Extremism just comes out of people being desperate for some sort of change due to bad economic conditions, or pretty much living in some sort of a despotic cultural situation where they get forced into some form of extremism. And that extremism can take really any kind of form that it wants. It has nothing to do with religion or lack of, because, like, we want to take, like, I see some people saying religion is the root of all evil. Well, the Soviet Union and every communist government is atheist by definition. They do not believe in any kind of an external religion, because according to original Marxist ideology, religion is nothing more than a fairy tale that's created by the elites or the bourgeoisie to put down the proletariat and pretty much tell them that your suffering is good and just be happy with your position in life suffering and just keep working harder. That's pretty much the belief that Marxists have. And every single communist government that has ever existed has never, except for the Kim dynasty, which pretty much made their leaders gods and made Juche pretty much the national religion. No other communist country has ever had an official state religion, and they pretty much go out of their way to destroy any kind of organized religion of any type. And yet all of those governments are wildly extreme. And there are also other kinds of governments as well that are religious in nature. For example, the Islamic Republic of Iran, or even some other forms of Christian theocracies in the past that also could be considered extreme to the absolute umpteenth degree. And I would say that in any one of those given situations, it was bad economic conditions or largely just a bad social or cultural condition that led people to just find something and cling to it and become extremists, believing that that extreme response to the ongoing situation would bring about a positive kind of change. So that's what I would say. I don't really think it has anything to do with religion or lack of. I think it's just bad conditions bringing people around to extremism, and they will cling to the closest thing they can find.
Maybe so, maybe so. I mean, it sounds like a good theory as well. It's just, I've always found it fascinating, like, especially in modern day America. Honestly, modern day America is to be studied because, well, you know, I don't want to make a comparison like that, so I won't do it. But modern day America is to be studied because it's like it's an odd situation in our country right now where people are in like a form of psychosis or something. It's like they've had a slate wiped clean, and they're looking for anything possible to cling on to. If it's a wild conspiracy theory, they'll cling on to it just to have something to be able to believe in. If it's politics, they'll do that. Some people, it's religion, they'll do that. It's just an extreme desire to find something to cling to and then turn it extremist as fast as they possibly can and start weaponizing it. It's just kind of interesting that way.
It is interesting. Honestly, sociology is a really, really kind of an interesting thing. But also, folks, we're not trying to get religious or political in here. This discussion just kind of on the borderline, and I was like, when Matthew brought it up in the chat, so I was like, I don't know about that. But we're not trying to get religious or political here. Just a disclaimer to some folks who go on the offensive. I do find it offensive when people try and say that for some reason Christianity is the root of all evil, because Matthew and me are Christians, just to give a little bit of disclaimer there. So it's a little bit rude to say that because we are believing, practicing Christians. So, you know, I don't really like to see that kind of stuff because I'm like, always like, why in the world are people going out of their way to say that? Because, you know, I do my own thing. I'm a Christian. It is what it is. But I don't go out of my way to say that atheists are the root of all evil and they need to be wiped out, or that atheism needs to be destroyed, because it's none of my business. It's a free country. Y'all can do what y'all want if you're an atheist or not, or if you're not even a Christian and you're something else entirely. That's your own business, because it's the United States of America. And while I'm doing my thing, y'all can do your own thing, and I really don't care. So with that, I hope that addresses that somewhat well. It kind of puts that all to rest. But nevertheless, we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news, as we were able to hear that a Ukrainian grain ship arrived in Tartus, Syria for the first time ever and was unloading grain. We're going to be turning that down. That's pretty loud.
Grain from Ukraine.
Matt Graham from Ukraine.
What the hell is going on outside? I hear like a freight train or something.
Yeah, honestly. Also, by the way, I did see you address something from Cajullian. Yeah, it's not really anything too tough. But the thing is that, Cajullian, we have to walk on eggshells. I hate that we have to do it, because we'll have stupid people come in like this guy, Miata, who just got banned, who says something in all caps. You think a dude died and walked out of a cave? Like, it's like, I don't know why people have to go there, because that guy has been here for at least a couple of days now. I've seen him in the chat a couple of times. And then the dude immediately people immediately go on the attack. It's like if there are atheists around and you say you're a Christian, all the atheists are going to act like they have to destroy your belief system atheism on the spot. And then if you're an atheist surrounded by Christians, the Christians act like they have to put you on a pyre and burn you alive at on site. Like, I don't know what it is with that, because it's like the United States of America has been built on an understanding, at least historically, that people are not going to be the same, and mind your own business is pretty much the philosophy of the United States. So I don't really know why in the hell everyone always acts like on a political or religious level they have to immediately go on the attack against someone who has opposite religious beliefs or political
That's that extremism
beliefs.
I'm talking about.
Yeah,
You're literally proving my point. You're proving my point. Whatever somebody believes in these days, you have to attack the side that believes something different, because that's just part of the extremism.
Yeah, because when I hear people in the chat say they're atheists, I'm just like, whatever. Like, you know, it's like I'm not going to try and convince you right now on the spot that you are wrong. Like, that's your own business. While I sit there and slam my phone around there for a second, that's y'all's own business. It's none of my business at all. And if I'm a Christian, that's my own business. I don't know why some people want to act like they're going to start confronting me about it. Like, if you're a stuck-up atheist or a stuck-up Christian, good on you. Like, but I'm not going to listen to your stupid stuff. Like, that's just like my straight-up answer to that. I'm not changing all my opinions on that kind of stuff, and you're not going to be changing them. And also, I have a feeling that it's going to be the same with you. You don't give a shit what I have to say about your belief system, and so what's the point of even bringing it up? Or what's the point of even trying to argue about it? Because neither one of us are going to be finding any common ground on that. So anyways, with that, we are going to be moving on into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, because we were able to see that they are attempting to right the vessel that fell over in the slipway. There it is.
Oh no, it's still on the side.
But they brought around every single floating crane in North Korea, I think, to try and fix this. And also, there's an odd amount of prophylactics in the water around this thing of a significant size. It appears that anyone but Kim Jong-un could have been in the area. Nevertheless, they're trying to fill the vessel with balloons to try and eventually right the vessel. I don't think it's going to work. Because I've never heard of that kind of a effort before. I don't know a lot about righting vessels in the modern day, but generally people use cranes to try and right the vessel, and then they slowly drain it after they're able to get it on an even keel. So I don't know what the hell they're...
It's interesting because they say they're trying to use airbags to lift it, and I guess they're trying to put the airbags and wedge them underneath the top part of the vessel that's currently leaning into the water, I guess. The only place I've ever seen airbags used like that is typically like in tow truck recovery operations. Like when, for example, if a semi-truck with a trailer flips over on its side, you'll see tow truck drivers often come up with these like large airbags that are deflated. They'll try to wedge them under the cab of the truck or something like that, and then they'll inflate the airbags and it'll flip the truck back up onto its wheels. But doing that on a ship level, especially one this large and one that's capsized and currently halfway in the water, I'm not sure how that would work, because the airbags are simply going to be floating on the water if you try to do that. So I don't think the North Koreans really know what they're doing here on this. They're just trying to basically take shots in the dark to fix it. And obviously the people trying to fix it are scrambling, because Kim Jong-un said have this ready by this date, and they're just going to try anything they can at this point because they don't want to get killed by Kim.
But from what I know, and I have to tell you all this, that my only knowledge of righting vessels is from the recovery efforts after the attack on Pearl Harbor to get all of those battleships back into operational condition. Back during that time, what they would do is that they would send in specialized divers into the vessel to seal off specific compartments, and then they would use a system of pumps to pump the water out of each individual area that they had made watertight, until eventually just the weight of the waterlogged side and the non-waterlogged side would start to slowly right the vessel and make it stand upright. And then eventually, once they were able to make it seaworthy enough, they would take it off to a dry dock somewhere to then completely remove all of the sealant, the temporary sealant, and then conduct permanent repairs to the vessel. That's at least the way they did it in World War II 80 years ago, but I've never heard of anyone just putting balloons inside of a vessel and trying to right it that way. I guess maybe they're trying to find some way to force buoyancy, maybe, but that doesn't right the vessel and make it any easier to bring it to a dry dock. They're going to have to eventually find some way to right it, which means that it will be sitting evenly on its keel to actually be able to conduct any real repairs to this. And still, the bow of the vessel is stuck on the slipway, so I don't really know how they're going to right the vessel even, because there is still this pivot point here that's going to have to be overcome. Like, what they're really going to have to do if they wanted to right this thing is that they would have to pull it off of the slipway and suffer serious damage to the bow on the starboard side for them to be able to even attempt to right it in the first place. They're not doing any of that, and they're just filling it with balloons and attempting to right it when it's on a pivot point and it wouldn't be able to.
Also, if the airbags even work and they're able to flip this thing up on its, I guess its top, I guess you could say, it seems like the moment it hits that center of gravity where it gets upright, it's probably going to flip the other way because the half of it's on land, and now it's going to have a bit of a pivot point, like I guess you were trying to say there, where it's going to flip over to the other side and probably just teeter that way. I don't know. To me, it seems like it really doesn't make much logical sense what they're trying to do here. I'm really not sure what they should do. It's like, should they try to maybe push the bow of the ship into the water as well, so that way they can try to, I guess, flip it entirely in the water? I'm not even really sure how you'd go about fixing this, to be honest. It's above my pay grade by a long shot.
It really is above my pay grade. I think this would be pretty difficult to fix any given way, even for advanced shipbuilders here in the West. I think this would be a pretty tough one to deal with. It probably would take months. And of course, Kim gave him an insane timeline. They have to get this done before the plenary in mid-June, and it's not going to be done by then. Never done by then. And also the shipyard officials that probably would be leading the charge have also been apprehended and arrested at this point on the orders of the Workers' Party of Korea, so they're not even around to really manage the whole thing, and they're now going to have new people, green people, who have just been put in the position trying to recover the vessel in an insane period of time that's about 2.5 weeks, which they just cannot do. So with that, I hope that does address that the best we can, at least with the news we have right now, because it is one hell of a story, that I'll say. But beyond that, we also have a question for all of y'all. North Korea is attempting to save its capsized destroyer by using airbags to lift it, and a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. And a lot of people are saying that this is not going to work and it's going to fail. Some others are saying that it will likely work and it's going to be a major success. And some others are saying, let's get a little bit more info on this before we make a decision. So Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 70% said it's going to fail. It's not happening. They're not going to right the ship. While 11% said it'll likely work. It'll be a big success. And 12% said, let's get some more info first. And I think the North Koreans are getting so desperate, they might call in Mr. Fredrickson from the Disney movie Up to attach as many balloons as possible to try to raise this thing into the air like an airship. But honestly, like all jokes aside, I would say it's probably going to fail. Like, I'm not a ship expert, obviously. I don't know much about ships at all. That would be a question for Walter A. Lakota, and I don't see him in the chat tonight. And also, I'm not even sure if Walter would know exactly how to fix this one, because this is a world-class problem here that the North Koreans have created for themselves. And it's very unfortunate for the people that did it, because, of course, this could mean life or death, depending on how they handle this problem. So maybe being under that kind of pressure, they'll get creative and pull this off, maybe, because they're literally being threatened with death if they don't pull it off. So I just don't know. Like, I'm sort of at a loss on this one. I'm kind of in the unsure category. But Enforcer, what say you?
Let's find out some information from a wreck that just hit my mind that actually would be similar, the Costa Concordia. This one actually did lean over onto its side in a shallow area, and they had to right the vessel. So how did they do it with a vessel that's far larger than the Hochon class destroyer? Let's see. Oh yeah, remember, folks. This is an unfortunate one, by the way, because 33 people did die in the sinking, and a diver also died afterwards, helping to recover the vessel. But this was when that idiot captain had his mistress up on the bridge and was wanting to impress her by sailing really close by the coastline, and he ended up running the thing up on an underground reef. Well, not really an underground reef, but it was more so of an underground rock outcropping. It punctured the side of the vessel, and it went over badly. Like the list was severe. The life rafts really couldn't be deployed properly, or the lifeboats couldn't be. There was a whole bunch of things that went wrong here, and it was completely by the incompetence of the orders of the captain. Man,
wait a minute, this was the one where the captain got on a lifeboat and took off, and the Coast Guard was telling him, Giuseppe, get back to the ship, Giuseppe. You're abandoning your post, Giuseppe. Get back to the ship.
And he said,
they're like screaming at him.
And he said, I'm sorry, I can't get on. I just got a fax from the company. I'm gonna have to go look at that. You better get back on that ship, damn it!
Man, that audio recording was wild. Like, the Coast Guard was having to literally scream at that guy to get his like cowardly self back on that vessel. He had literally just got on a lifeboat, was going to take off. Like, what the hell?
No, it wasn't just that. It was worse than that. He was on the first lifeboat out, along with most of the senior crew.
Geez.
So there was no one coordinating the evacuation effort after he left. That's why it was pure chaos for the large part, because he bailed immediately once reports came from below that the ship had been punctured below the waterline across half of the hull, and it was taking on water rapidly. He said, "Oh, it's time to dip," and he went with the first lifeboat off. He wasn't on any of the last lifeboats. First one off along with the senior crew. It was absolutely an egregious thing. A captain has a responsibility to the crew and passengers of his vessel, and for him to leave on the first lifeboat along with the senior staff of the vessel and not coordinate the rescue was a severe act of cowardice. I would actually say that it was such a severe act of cowardice that if Italy did have the death penalty, I would say that the death penalty should have been considered for such an act of cowardice as that, as putting thousands of people's lives in danger because of your already incompetent actions that were taken earlier on in the voyage. That was just a tremendously terrible thing. But anyways, moving on from that, let's see how they righted the vessel. Let's see. By the cruiser's insurer. Let's see. The Parbuckle. Let's see. The ship.
Oh, they use sponsons, also known as flotation tanks, welded to the sides.
So they weren't really balloons, but they kind of were using the same concept as a balloon.
Interesting. Also, let's see here. The total cost of the disaster, refloating, towing, scrapping, $2 billion. Obviously, the ship's a lot bigger, I think, than that destroyer, so this one's going to cost a bit more. But how long did it take?
Let's see here. How long did it take? The Costa Concordia. Also, look at this, man. Schettino, who was the captain, was only found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. I would say that this should have been at a minimum, at least in America by law, third-degree murder, because it wasn't an accidental whoopsie-daisy. It was gross negligence on the operation of the vessel from his command alone, and then also he immediately left the vessel and pretty much left these thousands of people to die. It was pretty much on the crew themselves and the Italian Coast Guard that only 33 people ended up dying, well, 32 on board, and it's like that pretty much, in my opinion, that should have been life in prison for such a severe thing as that. Because while only 32 people died, if the Coast Guard hadn't been on scene as quick as they were, much more people would have died. And it wasn't something like the Titanic where it was just truly an unfortunate incident that could have been avoidable under better circumstances. This was purely gross negligence on the captain's part. He should have been held responsible to the highest degree.
And also, it looks like September of 2013 is when the salvage began. And then in July of 2014, which was next year, the ship was refloated using sponsons. And then apparently it was taken to Genoa for scrapping. So interesting. So that was about September, October, November, December. That was about, what's a 4 plus 6? They got about 12 months, almost a whole year almost, or getting close to it or something.
Also, another thing, though, look at this. On the 16th of September, the salvage began. On the 17th of September, they already had it sitting evenly on its keel the next day.
Wait a minute, I'm not understanding that.
On the 16th of September, the Parbuckle salvage of the ship began, and by the early hours of 17th of September, the ship was set upright on her underwater cradle. So that means that they already had lifted the ship in a single day off of its side and onto its keel, which is the bottom of the ship.
Interesting. But yet it took till July to refloat it using sponsons. Also, it doesn't tell us the time it took to actually set up the Parbuckle salvage either. So I don't think we can actually tell what a good time frame would be on this, but it would probably be close to a year, it sounds like.
If we scrolled all the way through here, we probably would be able to find all of this out. We're not going to take all of that time, though. Jeez. Oh, my God, dude. The boulder was actually still stuck in there.
Oh, geez. Also, could you imagine, like, this was one situation here I would actually probably be horrified, actually. If you were trying to get off this ship right here and you were trying to go down the side of it using ropes and stuff to get down to, like, a lifeboat or, like, a helicopter to pick you up, that would be horrifying. Like, that actually would be terrifying.
That would be terrifying. Like, honestly, man, I find shipwrecks to be some of the most terrifying things ever. I think they're more terrifying than plane crashes, because plane crashes, it's like at the longest, maybe a few minutes before the aircraft hits the ground, and most people end up getting killed instantly. With this, it takes a while, usually in the modern day, because of how many redundancies and safety systems are built into ships for them to sink, so it could take hours of just raw terror through the whole thing. And then also, if you end up in the water, and you end up without a life vest, or you just end up running out of strength and giving up, then you drown. And drowning is a terrible way to go. From a lot of people who have drowned and have been resuscitated, they said it is terrible to drown. In my opinion, one of the worst ways to go is by drowning. And so it's just a scary thing, being on a ship and thinking of it sinking and not being able to get off. And I think, and that's why I consider it so seriously what Scatino did. He pretty much said, I'm going to put my own life over the life of the 4,252 people on board, and I'm just going to hop off and save myself, and all these people, I could care less if they drown or not. That is just insane to think that there's that lack of empathy or any kind of sympathy for everyone that he just left behind on the ship. That's an insane kind of a person. That's someone in a mental state that is quite truly a psychopath or something along those lines, I would assume. Because I can't fathom doing that. Like, I could never fathom being on a ship, putting it in a bad situation, and then hopping off immediately and leaving without even trying to help anyone off at all. This is crazy to me. But anyways, beyond that, let's see if we can get any info on the salvage. Let's see. Oh, there was looters. Wow, that's like a classic thing. Like, that it's still happening in 2013 too. Let's see here. Let's see. Salvage. Here we go. Dutch salvage actively started to remove the vessels 2,300. So really, salvaging already started in February of 2012 when they were removing the fuel oil. But still, I don't know how long it will take them, but it's going to take them a little bit of time. Anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on out of the Chongjin harbor news and on into the remainder of the news we have for tonight, which is nothing. We actually made it to the end of the news. We don't have a speech from Zelensky today, because Zelensky didn't make one, so unfortunately we weren't able to include that, but we are going to be moving all into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. And boy howdy, what a fun segment's going to be. We have already been able to raise $3,091 on the fundraiser, which is about $600 above the fundraiser goal. Very impressive, and we love to know the Lee Spring Army is still continuing to support American and Western interests through these incredible fundraisers. But with that, we are going to be getting on into the remainder of these questions, because we have a great deal of live chat questions that have been thrown in tonight. We want to make sure to get to as many of them as we can. And so with that, Matthew, who are our top donors that have come in between the last segment and this one? And also, what are the live chats that we have?
All right. So, what was that? But anyways, I'll have to find out what that is in just a minute. Sound like somebody tapping or rapping on the door. But anyways, since the last time we called off our top donors of the night, we had a $333 donation from none other than Hal Rose, a massive one, by the way, and also a $250 from Crusher Guy, as well as a $50 from Dragoon 50, as well as a $50 from Tim Fox, also Light Spider, and Mark of the Kinetic Possum, who makes a return once again to the channel. And it's good to see you once again. And also, big shout out to all of the top donors since the last segment, and we do appreciate that generosity, because we are now sitting at almost $3,100 raised of the $2,500 goal, which is tremendous to see, and we do appreciate that very much. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to give a huge congratulations and thanks to each and every single one of y'all who has supported the fundraiser tonight. It's gotten up to an amazing fundraiser total of $3.1 thousand. And not only that, there has been a load of people in the Lee Spring Army who have supported this thing through and through. Through years, we have been able to see that the Lee Spring Army has never missed a single fundraiser goal. And we are absolutely amazed and enthused to see the Lee Spring Army continues to hit the fundraiser goals and continues to keep the support of American and Western interests alive. So a huge congratulations and thanks to all of y'all once again. And Matthew, have you been able to inspect the odd tapping noise?
And I didn't really find out what it was, to be honest with you. I'm just sort of at a loss.
He is at a total loss, but nevertheless, we are going to be moving on into the questions of the night. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
You know, at the end of the day, though, I'm not really worried about it, because obviously, you know, we're packing, but so I'm not worried about it. Whatever it is, it'll be good. But anyways, jumping into our final question segment of the night, it's time to grab some live chat questions proper, because it is that time of the night. So jumping into our first live chat question, we've already grabbed our Morse code decoders of the night. So this one is going to go to Christian Cruz, who said, could the officials being moved from Moscow was for Putin to avoid them talking together to plan a coup, and nothing better than a hole in the Urals to stop that?
I would doubt that a little bit, because Generally, these kinds of things are just not done unless if there is a larger national emergency reason or a national preparedness drill that's being conducted for continuity of government operations. So I would generally say that that probably isn't the case. This may have been a continuity of government drill that happened yesterday, or it may have actually been the preparation of emergency headquarters in case if there is something that would constitute a national emergency breaks out here in the near future. Moving on from that, though, we are going to be on into the next question.
And this one goes to the last ninja, who said, what do you guys think about Russia hosting Hamas leaders just before October the 7th?
And it's on brand for Russia. Russia is in support of any kind of terrorist force or any illegitimate dictatorial government around the world, and so it's pretty much just par for the course at that point. It really shows exactly what kind of people they are, at least in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than John Underwood. He said, as far as you know, and based on the available info, has there been a coup attempt in Moscow?
There doesn't appear to have been a coup attempt so far. We haven't been able to see any additional coup activities today. We really didn't see any yesterday. So I would have to say no. There is no ongoing coup in Moscow, at least according to our information. And I promise you folks that if there was a coup going on, Matthew and me would be covering that lickety-split. I'm sure that all of y'all know. I mean, a lot of y'all have been around for a really long time on this channel. And y'all know that we get to the news usually before everyone else does. The only person that gives us a run for our money is really Agenda Free TV. Whenever anything super big is going on, he'll also go live. So if neither of us are covering it, that pretty much means it has not happened. So I can assure you all that at the moment. If it does happen, though, we will be going live on an emergency broadcast because coups in Russia are pretty big. The last time it happened was a Wagner coup in the middle of 2023, and that one was quite significant. Everyone knows that. It lasted for about it lasted really for about 16 to 20 hours before it ended. But still, if another one like that happens, or if any coup happens, even if it isn't like that, we will be making sure to go live immediately and cover it. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to AF Kaplan, who said, is it known which countries are still accepting Russian oil from these Shadow Fleet vessels? And if yes, can anything be done to prevent their taking this oil?
There are some. The Republic of India is probably one of the most obvious ones, as well as the People's Republic of China. But there really isn't any way to stop them. Once these vessels hit international water and they're not near to the coastal or territorial waters of a country that is attempting to enforce these sanctions, there is pretty much nothing that really can be done. So unfortunately, our hands are kind of tied with that. The only way we can do something is seizing these vessels if they get close to the territorial waters of a Western-aligned country. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least as far as my information goes. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Wyserat, who said, do you have any news about Putler's bunker next to Chelyabinsk, the one that's in the mountains, and can you show it to us? And thank you for the work.
Yes, I actually can. I can show that complex. It's out here somewhere. I'm trying to see if I can spot it, just eyeball it. Probably not going to be able to.
Zoom back out where you can show me where Chelyabinsk is. I can probably eyeball it real quick.
Let's see here. Here's Chelyabinsk.
Zoom in just a little bit and keep Chelyabinsk in the right corner. Zoom in some more.
It's in the mountains.
You see the green text over here, I think.
This one? Or this
Go
one?
down to the right. Oh, you see that little white dot over here on the right? Right in the middle next to Plost over there on the right. On the right. Go over to the right. There's like go see that white. I think it's right over here somewhere.
This is
nope,
a limestone
maybe not.
mine.
Yeah, you might have typed it in. Never mind.
Let's see. We'll just type it in. Yamanets. Mount Yamanatu. We were right there. We were right on the thing. It was this. Okay, so this is it. This is the place. Here's some of the facility. It looks like crap. Everything in Russia looks like crap. Sadly, no pictures of the actual facility. That's to be expected. Okay, I was about to say, I was like, that almost looks like a real picture until I clicked on it. Apparently, it's from some game, but that's also from some game. What game is that? Anyways, this is supposedly. Now, what is this?
That's nothing.
Bro, that's Putin's snow stash right there.
You know, the this complex here, it's been under construction actually for like I think more than 5 decades, like 50 years or something. They've had like tons of workers. The whole reason why the West figured out that they were doing something there that must be massive is because they literally have like 70,000 workers going to and from this mountain, and that little staging point out there where you see off to the left that we keep looking at is where they would stage from, and they'd be going right into an underground entrance right into the side of that mountain, and also underneath the mountain too. So a lot of people speculate that maybe it's the equivalent of what we have in the United States, where you can generally house the entire government there in the event of a nuclear crisis or something like that, and you can still function as a government, at least from underneath the mountain. So we don't really have any pictures of it, but that's what it's speculated to be.
Man, Russians are stupid even in their emergency preparedness. Let's put the whole government under one mountain so that way the mountain can be hit by a nuke and the whole thing can become seismically unstable and cave in on us. It's like, isn't it smarter? I think the American system is the smartest one because we have 3 backup offices for every single department of the government at every single level. So if something is to happen, we have 3 different headquarters along with the main one. So there's really technically 4. So like with the executive branch, there's the president, and then if the president and his office is pretty much wiped out, then Office A takes over, and if Office A in a different location is wiped out, then Office B takes over, and then if Office B is wiped out, then Office C takes over. So you have to knock out all 4 of them to effectively knock out the U.S. government, meaning that the chances of that happening are pretty low because, of course, there's only a 30% chance that, 30% of the population is going to get killed in the initial onslaught of a nuclear conflict. So that means that you're running a pretty good chance that 2 or 3 of those headquarters are going to survive, and that means that the government is able to keep going. The Russians, instead, from what we know, pretty much put all of them under this one mountain. So if it gets blown up and it actually caves in on them, the whole Russian government is dead. That's a little bit dumb to me.
Well, also, by the way, I do have the CIA report on it, by the way, if you want to like show that to the audience.
Sure.
It's a report actually by the CIA. I sent you the link to the PDF and the link if you want to show it either on the website or the PDF.
So here we go. Let's see here. Oh, this is from 2012. This is actually somewhat recent. Let's see here.
It's been sanitized for release.
Let's see here.
Oh, look, some new intelligence.
Materials receiving area. So, yes, we have Matthew the saddles and the hill. You know, all that crap. Let's see here. So, where is the actual Mount Yamanatu? So, Beloretsk is down here. So, we need to find Beloretsk. They're showing what appears to be actually a different area, unless if this one of these towns around here has been Okay, so there's Beloretsk. So this gives us a little bit of an idea of the scale of this thing. So it appears that actually that is, let's see, housing support area north, ramping operations. Oh, there actually is the town names. They're just a little bit small. So Mezhgorye is right there, and then the housing and support unit is south of that, which appears to have maybe disappeared. It looks like it's gone because this is direct east of Mezhgorye, and Mezhgorye is right there, and then that's over here. So this is the actual mountain, and they're showing that there was something further south down here, at least from what we're seeing. But this appears to be direct east. So that's interesting. And then there's a material receiving area somewhere around here. This must be the material receiving area, I'm assuming, because that looks to be in a similar spot. And this also appears, wait a minute, this is actually what they were pointing out as the housing area, the housing and support area south. This appears to have had all the barracks removed, because you can see where the foundations once were, but it looks like the whole place was razed. And now all that exists is the compound over here directly on the side of the mountain. But anyways, moving on from that.
Also, by the way, apparently there are photos, we have some photos from the ground, by the way, because this was actually attached to some images that were taken back in January of 1984. So we do have some intelligence from the ground. I don't have it, but the government has it, apparently showing some on-the-ground views of the construction, because it was started of like 50 years ago, this thing being built, and it is an operations center. And of course, this, I believe, is the highest peak in the Urals. So that's probably why this mountain was picked, because Yamantau is the largest mountain in the Ural southern range. So that's probably why it was picked. But also there was something else in this report I was going to point out. I was trying to scroll down to it real quick. Let's see. They said that the early stage of the construction was in March of 1978. So they've been working on it all the way up to the present day. So I'm not even sure if it's really functioning right now, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it's either in the final stages of construction or it could be finished. But there's like a huge explosive storage area in it. There's an electrical power substation. It's got its very own one for the mountain. And it's got, it's actually apparently no security fences around it. Yeah, just very fascinating. Sort of a vague report, I'll be honest with you, because obviously this was just an attachment to something, but kind of interesting just to see they at least acknowledged it.
Yeah, also this whole thing was written in 1984, so this is actually about as old as the beginning of the construction of the complex, only dating it by a few years. So this is very old information. I'm sure they probably have a lot more. Let's see, that the project extends for over rugged terrain. Let's see. I always like reading this kind of information. It's always fun. You know, we ought to get a job at the CIA. That'd be kind of fun. But anyways, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
All right. So our next live chat question goes to Drew, who said, can you show some of Finland's underground bunkers? Let's see what those look like.
Finland's underground bunkers? Sure, I can pull them up. I don't know the exact location of them, but we can always pull them up and take a look. Underground bunker city. Let's take a look at the underground bunker city. Here is Helsinki. Here's Helsinki's underground city. Look at that.
Wow, that is nice.
Wow.
That reminds me of like the salt mines that Ukraine has, you know, where they were selling like the salt to raise money. Yeah, it looks similar to it.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting. Honestly, it's really cool. I like the look of it.
I do like that. It's very neat.
Man, me on my way to the liquor store. Man, like walking through this cave. But still, I like it. It's really neat. And I thank you for asking about this, and it's a very cool look, I'll have to say. I don't know a lot about them though. This is the first time I've ever really heard of them. But still, with that, I hope that addresses that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Live Animal, who said, would evacuation of Moscow officials not make a coup more likely due to a lack of oversight?
A coup would still be likely whether they're there or not, especially if you're putting them off in a fringe area where you really can't keep an eye on them, and it's hard for security services to reach them in large amounts and surveil them a lot. That actually could make it easier for them to form a coup, pretty much in exile from the capital, and then just return and then conduct the coup. So really, I would say that moving the government personnel around, especially in the modern day, it doesn't really increase or decrease the chances of a coup, in my opinion. And so with that, I hope that addresses that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to LSA Up Guy, who says, what are the chances that Russia might accidentally shoot down, excuse me, might accidentally shoot down a NATO patrol aircraft?
I would say the chances of that happening are probably maybe 20 to 30%. I would say that their chances, though, of shooting down a commercial airliner of their own is far higher than the chances of them shooting down a NATO aircraft, in my opinion. But I'd say somewhere around 20 to 30%. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to Measure Man, who says, are you guys following the development of ground-based drones, etc. in Ukraine recently? It feels like the sleeping dragon.
Yes, I actually have seen those ground-based drones. We've actually been covering them over the years, pretty much from when they were taking their first steps to now usable weapon systems on the field. So we have been following that. It's a very interesting kind of a thing to see how Ukraine's implementing drones into every facet of the military, and I think that they're really starting to become the template of the future for a lot of other armies that have far larger and more effective budgeting than the state of Ukraine. So I think they're pretty much just the proving ground for what war is going to look like here in the next 5 years, probably. And so with that, I hope that addresses that well. Thank you once again for asking a great question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Daunted, who said, I heard Ukraine try to shoot down a helicopter that Putin was in, and they intercepted the missiles. And have you heard that? Is there any truth to it?
There's no truth to that at all. Putin has not flown around on a helicopter recently, and considering that he is most likely around the Moscow area or further east than that, if he was in a helicopter, Ukraine has absolutely no missiles with any kind of range to actually try and hit that helicopter. So that story kind of sounds like the whole train hijacking, driving it back into Ukraine with a whole bunch of Su-57s on board kind of story. Does not sound real at all, because we have gotten no proof of that whatsoever, and I've never heard of that story. And beyond that, the Ukrainians do not have that kind of capability at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from, let's see here, Michael Thomas. He said Russian sources say Putin offed some of his bodyguards. True, false, or any sources you have on the issue? And me personally, I haven't heard anything about that. If that is true, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked, because Putin has been purging people. He's been purging people in the business sector of Russia. I'm sure that he's been firing people around his personal circle. Pretty much ever since Prigozhin tried to overthrow him, Putin has been more paranoid than usual about getting overthrown again. Because once that happened, and Prigozhin, who was typically a longtime ally of Putin, that made Putin so paranoid that he started examining literally every single person that was close to him, no matter if they were a longtime like loyalist or whatever. So he was already paranoid, and that made him extra paranoid. So now he's like a real bad psychopath and a real lunatic who likes to isolate himself. So maybe so, but I hadn't heard anything about it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I haven't heard anything about it either, but I largely consider things like that to be rumors. If anything ever sounds like it's starting to get into action movie level stuff, like I did not trust you, and then like guns down like 3 bodyguards and like the Kremlin, and that kind of stuff generally would be most likely untrue. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You gotta know though that after Prigozhin got done doing his little shtick about a year or so ago, wasn't that about a year ago when he did the Prigozhin coup?
Yeah. Well, actually, no, it was like, it was 2 years ago, actually.
Yeah, a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe something like that. You know that Putin, after that one, he was looking at everybody from that point forward, because if Prigozhin was willing to do that, and he's the only one who had the military to be able to pull it off, the paramilitary group to go after him in Moscow. You know that he was looking at everybody else thinking, okay, these people are about to turn on me too any second if they have the opportunity, and I need to isolate. And that's probably why he's gotten so much more isolated since then, is trying to basically vacuum seal himself so that way nobody can get close to him to off him.
Yeah, maybe so. But I don't think it's happened recently. If that did happen, it probably happened during the Wagner coup. But I wouldn't assume that would be happening recently, at least in my opinion. And I might be wrong. I don't know. But
I think that as the war drags on and it starts looking as more and more of a failure for Putin, that makes his paranoia probably go up a lot, because you got to remember, there's no off ramp for Putin in this war right now, and he's not taking any off ramp, because if he takes it, the Russian economy is going to go to shit. It's going to basically destroy itself. So then he'll be under fire for destroying the Russian economy. If he keeps the war going though, and he's not winning the war, and he's not making any progress, he's going to be under fire for that too. So even though he is an authoritarian and knocks people off that typically oppose him, there is a certain level that he can get to where he is in danger of being ousted. And the longer the war goes on, that risk starts rising tremendously. So, that paranoia has got to be setting in.
maybe. I mean, that actually might be more correct than my assessment. Possibly. Maybe. Who knows? But with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Joe Guerra, who said, do the drones start to lose signal as they approach their target due to some sort of anti-drone defense mechanism near their target?
Most of the drones that you're watching on film are losing their signal because they're getting low to the ground, and there's a decent amount of interference at that point with the signal, and that's what makes the vision look fairly blurry on the cameras. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to AF Kaplan, who said, if Russia's air defense did shoot down one of its own airliners, do you think that would finally get the Russian people to stand up against their government?
I don't think so. I think that the Russian public has been browbeaten so badly over the decades and centuries that they really don't stand up to do much of anything. I think it largely be probably brushed under the rug, and they would blame it on a Ukrainian drone or something similar, and then just leave it at that. But I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Jack Ragnarsson, who said, would a massive Ukrainian strike on the Ust-Luga oil terminal, completely destroying it, would it completely cripple Russia's oil industry?
Yes, it would, because this is their major oil access port in the entirety of Western Russia that pretty much allows for them to export petroleum products throughout the world. It would be really hard to knock the whole thing out. They have attacked it in the past, and they did cause some decent damage to some parts of the facility, but knocking out the whole thing would be a pretty momentous lion style kind of an effort, or lion size effort. It would be very tough to do. But if they did knock it out, you would be pretty much assured at that point that Russian abilities to export petroleum products and to continue to keep their economy functioning at a minimum level would pretty much cease to exist, most likely within months from that happening. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for being here tonight and enjoying the stream. We were able to raise $3,111 in support of Naval Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit that has been helping out in Ukraine for years now, well before even the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 by the Russian army. I've got to thank you all so much once again for supporting American and Western interests around the globe, and of course, we'll be seeing you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of news from around the world. And if we have any big news that's coming out tomorrow, Matthew will be the one making the midday short war video to tell you all what is going on then. But still, we will see you all either in the midday tomorrow or on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Leaf Spring Army, and the Leaf Spring Army will never die.
And once again, folks, thank you all for joining us once again tonight and helping us to raise $3,111 for our charity of the night to help Ukraine. And once again, big thanks for helping to make that happen tonight. And also, be sure to enjoy your Memorial Day tomorrow. And of course, hopefully it is a very meaningful Memorial Day for everybody who has served and all the veterans out there. And once again, we will see you all midday tomorrow as well for the short war video if there is enough news to cover, and also on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for our next nightly war news stream. But until then, thank you all for watching, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.